woke up and I couldn't get out of bed. It wasn't exhaustion or some kind of paralysis. It was like the bed itself wouldn't even let me. Every time I tried to sit up, the frame dipped away, the mattress slanted, the whole thing slid out just out of reach or even balance. I gripped the side rail, but it bent down like rubber. The harder I pushed, the deeper it sagged. "Come on," I muttered to myself, trying to swing my leg over. My heels sank straight into the sheets like they were made of water. Something inside of me quickly got queasy. The air in the room felt weird, warped. The nightstand wasn't where it should have been. It leaned away from me, its drawer half open. But the harder I tried to reach it, the further it seemed to get. The lamp above it was flickering. There was messy clothes everywhere. I planted both hands on the bed and pushed, and for a second, it actually worked until the wall behind me then lurched. The room tilted, not violently, just enough to make me lose every sense of direction. The dresser slid upward into the ceiling, the floor pitched sideways. I clawed toward the door, but it crawled up the wall like some kind of insect. Nothing seemed to stay still. The house creaked and stretched and groaned as it settled into some kind of new shape. My stomach churned. I tried standing, but the floor folded under me like loose paper. I fell again, this time hitting something hard that gave way instantly, and before I could even scream, the room began to roll. The beds, the walls, everything turning over and over in slow motion. Oh my God. True raw panic then took a hold of me, and my vision tunneled. And then, just like that, it was gone. All of it. The room, the light, the sounds. Only blackness pressing in from every side. The darkness was heavy, like I was buried underneath it, and for a while, I couldn't tell if my eyes were even open. I reached out and brushed something solid, wood maybe, but it slipped away like it didn't want to be touched. My hand then hit the floor, but the floor shifted. I couldn't get a grip on anything. I pulled myself forward, dragging my knees through grit. My body didn't feel right. My head was pulsing with this static. My arms felt light, disconnected. I called out, but I could never actually hear my voice. When I lifted my head again, there were people now in the room, dozens of them, scattered through the shadows, faces that I knew, my family. "Mom?" She smiled at me beyond calm, and I felt like a kid again. The others were smiling too, my sister, my uncle, cousins that I hadn't seen in years, all of them standing there throughout the wreckage of my house. Then they started to clap, dozens of them, people I didn't recognize but instinctually knew that I was related to. "Keep going," my mom said to me. Her voice was easy to understand, but I don't actually remember hearing it. I didn't even think to question her, I just kept crawling toward them. Every moment set this dull pain throughout my feet, but I didn't stop. I wanted to reach them. The ground under me changed from carpet to plaster to something jagged. It scratched against my palms, and when I looked down, the floor was now gone. It was stone, gray, uneven, cracked. Weeds stuck out between the slabs, brushing against my arms as I moved. I blinked trying to stay oriented, but the shadows shifted every few seconds. "You're doing good," somebody said, but I couldn't see who it was. Their clapping grew louder, echoing off these unseen walls. It sounded hollow. The smiles started to look strained, like they were holding something back. Their eyes never even blinked. None of them stepped closer. They just stood there, watching. I called out, "Help me," but nobody moved. Pain flared in my ankles, brought me immediately to tears, or maybe they'd already been there the whole time. I rolled onto my back and tried to breathe. My legs were heavy, twisted. Every nerve in my body was buzzing. The air around me changed again. It was cooler now. Wind, definitely wind, but faint, real, brushing against my face. I looked up and saw light. Not bright, not sunlight, but moving. White beams cutting across the dark. Flashlights? Was that really even wind? Where the hell am I? At first I thought they were far above me on ceiling that I couldn't see, but as the lights moved, the shapes of rocks then appeared. The light hit dust and shadows, outlining an incline, a slope. There were pine trees on either side of what I was seeing. A voice then shouted my name, and not in that calm, mystical tone from before. This one was exhausted, desperate. "Hold on! We see you!" The clapping then stopped. I looked around me and the figures were gone. No fading, no sound, only the dark and flicker of the light overhead. tried to lift my head again. It throbbed. The world tilted and I saw the outline of ropes swinging down a slope. Shadows moved above me. Real people this time, dropping down to me. I tried to speak, but my jaw would not open, and all I could taste was blood. The pain in my feet pulsed in time with my heartbeat. I looked down and saw the shredded remains of a climbing harness and a bone sticking through the fabric of my pants. My mind quickly started to catch up. I was not in a room. I wasn't crawling through my house. I was outside. The voice called out to me again. "Don't move, we're coming." I stared up at the lights blinking against the dirt falling from above, and for the first time, I felt everything and just wanted to pass out. When I opened up my eyes again, there was movement all around me. Boots, ropes, voice calling to each other. A headlight beam then cut through the dark and landed on my face. "Hey, holy fuck, he's alive," somebody said. It was Evan. His helmet light made his face look a little haunting. "Hey, don't move, man. You took a hell of a fall." All I could do was moan. He dropped down next to me. "Your tether gave out. Back up too. You went down 70, maybe 80 feet, dude. I honestly can't fucking believe you're alive." I tried to move, but the pain shot through my legs like I stepped on a landmine. More blood in my throat. Everything from the waist down felt off by 45 degrees. It shifted, broken, swollen. "Dude, stay still," Evan said to me. "We got a rescue team on the way." I stared up at the sky, stars, a few wisps of clouds. The rocks around me were very unforgiving. How was I alive? I could see the broken trail of my fall, a path of scraped stone, snapped branches, and disturbed brush leading down to where I now lay. Bits of the memory began coming back. The strange room, the clapping, my family's faces. None of it made sense now, though. Had it all been noise in my head while my body was trying to hang on? I don't know. The team reached me within the hour. They checked my vitals, splinted my leg, and secured me to a stretcher. Each adjustment sent a pulse of pain up my spine, which terrified me. I thought I'd never walk again. That climb back out was really slow. Every few feet, I felt the shift of the rope and hands supporting me. I tried to not think about how close I'd come to the edge of everything, but I couldn't help myself. At the top, red and blue lights were flickering against some of the rocks. Somebody covered me up with a blanket. I felt like they would do the same thing if I came up as nothing but a corpse, too. Later on, they said it was a miracle. That fall should have killed me. Somehow I'd landed at just the right angle, hit just enough to brush the slow of the impact. Both ankles were shattered, one leg was broken, collarbone cracked, but I was alive. Recovery was long, months and months of physical therapy, metal rods, and chronic pain. I can walk now, mostly fine, but it took over a year of rest and rehab. For obvious reasons, I don't climb anymore, mostly because I can, but I am very thankful to be alive. Thankful for that super bizarre experience that may or may not have kept me among the living. I can still hear that applause in the back of my head. I'd been staying at Chris's place for around a week when things began to get weird. Her apartment wasn't much. Second floor, noisy street below, sketchy neighbors, but it beat the dump that I'd been renting on the south side. Her building always smelled like dog food. Still, it had AC and a door that actually locked, so I can't complain. That first Friday night, we fell asleep watching TV. I woke up around 2 in the morning with the sense that somebody else was in the room with me. Not the usual creaks or pipes, something alive. The doorway was black and a shape filled it, unnaturally dark. For a few seconds, I couldn't tell if it was a trick of the light, but then it moved. It didn't step forward though, it just kind of shifted like liquid shadow sliding across a wall. I sat up, heart pounding. The shape then drifted toward the kitchen, almost melting as it went. I quickly thought to myself that somebody's in the apartment. "Chris! Chris!" I whispered, shaking her, but nothing. She was dead asleep. I got up and followed the thing. The hallway felt unnaturally long. Every creak cranked to 11. The floorboards, my breathing, all super loud. In the kitchen, the dark shape slipped out of sight around the corner. I hit the light switch, but nothing there. Every window was locked, the front door too. I even checked the bathroom and the closet, both empty. For a long while, I stood there in this pale yellow light, trying to reason it away. A shadow, a dream, exhaustion. But something about it still creeped me the hell out. The next morning, I told Chris about what I saw. She didn't even act surprised, just sipped her coffee and said, "Yeah, well, weird stuff happens here sometimes." And that was that. No questions, no disbelief, like she'd been expecting me to say something. The next night, I locked everything again. The windows, doors, even the bathroom window that barely opened. At around 3 a.m, I woke up to the sound of somebody walking. Not loud, but clear enough to separate it from being in another unit. I turned my head and saw it again, standing near the bedroom door. "Chris," I said quietly. She stirred, her eyes now open, and froze. "Yeah," she said to me. "I see it." The thing moved just enough to break its outline, and then it was gone. We lay there for hours waiting to hear a door, a step, anything else, but the place around us remained still. "So, is this normal?" I asked her. "No, it's not," was her response. It came back the next 2 nights, always between 2 and 4, always in that slow creeping fashion. I tried to catch it, but it was fucking impossible. By Sunday, neither of us were sleeping very much. I kept waking up in these short bursts, the air around me feeling heavy, my limbs feeling like lead. One of those times, I opened up my eyes and couldn't move at all. The figure was in fact there again, close enough to see the edges of its head against the glow of the window. I felt like I was being pinned to some kind of dissection board. It reached for me, hands, just black though, no detail, and closed around my neck. I tried to shout, but nothing came out. Everything in me strained to move, but nothing worked. The pressure built until it finally faded. I woke up to daylight, Chris sitting beside me, pale and shaking. "We're choking," she said. "Your eyes were open, but you weren't awake." My throat was hurting when I swallowed. I didn't have bruises, but I did have a copper taste that was lingering, almost like I bit my tongue or something. The next night, we stayed up, determined to finally see it clearly. Having been up for days at this point, we ended up falling asleep though. The clock passed midnight, and when I awoke, it was there again, standing on the bed. This time, something was in its hands, this dark block of something. I didn't even have time to react before it came down. First on Chris, then onto me, and everything went black. When I came to, the morning light was leaking in through the blinds. Chris was now on the floor, dazed, and she had blood in her hair. My head was dropping, but we were both breathing. Neither of us really said much. We just kind of stared at the walls, trying to remember what the hell happened to us last night. The blood in her hair turned out to have actually come from her ear. There was this dry trail that was pretty evident. Chris cleaned herself up in the bathroom while I sat at the table, just kind of staring at the floor. That apartment felt possessed, and we were powerless against it. We decided to call the police, thinking maybe somebody had in fact broken in and drugged us, doing God knows what while we slept. I know it sounds far-fetched, but we had no other explanation. Before we made the call, somebody knocked. 2 cops stood outside, uniform, both looking like they'd been at it all day. Is everything okay in here?" one asked. I nodded him suspiciously. "Why?" I figured this was going to be it. These guys were about to tell us there was in fact a madman loose in the area, harassing people all over. "There's a gas leak in the building," he said. "We're asking everybody to step out until maintenance finally gets it sealed." For a second, I blinked and just stared at him. Then it all lined up, the choking, the dizziness, the metallic taste. Chris came up behind me. The officers told us to grab a few things and leave immediately. We packed what we could and went outside. The air tasted amazing. How long had we been in there? We watched the maintenance crew drag hoses toward the basement. The whole building was being evacuated. We stayed at my place that night. Guess what? No shadows, no noises, no waking up short of breath, just sleep. 2 days later, a woman from the gas company called. The leak had been a trickle, she said, seeping through the walls for weeks. People on our floor were reporting the same symptoms as us: headaches, confusion, vivid dreams, and hallucinations in some cases. That was enough for me. Chris ended up staying with me for quite some time. And occasionally, I still will wake up in the middle of the night, almost certain that I'm seeing somebody standing at the door. Then I open up the window, take a breath, and remind myself, take a breath. Senior ditch day is certified freedom. We skipped class, filled up a cooler, and headed for the river. Music thumped from a Bluetooth speaker. Beer cans would pile up, and every few minutes somebody screamed bloody murder from the cliff above the main swimming hole. No parents, no teachers, just water, noise, and us crazy-ass kids. Cole bumped my shoulder, grinning at me. One last memory before we're out of here, right? Yeah, I said. Let's make it a good one, dude. By mid-afternoon, we were sunburnt and half drunk. Somebody shouted about the box, that narrow chute upstream where the cool kids jumped, did backflips and shit. Most would wave it off, but not us. Cole didn't. He just gave me that look that said, come on, man. So the four of us left the group and hiked the rocky path along the cliff. The further we went, the louder the river got, a low roar among some stones. When we finally saw it, the box looked nothing like I remembered it. Just this tiny slit in the canyon, water surging through the darkness below. Cole whistled, stared down at the narrow pool below. Perfect, he said, but I had no idea what he was talking about. We dropped our stuff onto the rocks and just stared down it. The pool below looked deep enough, sure, but the chute that fed it was really narrow, barely wide enough for a person, at least at the bottom. The current was slamming through it, twisting white water between two black slabs before bursting back out into the pool. Cole was grinning at me like a maniac. You going first, or is it gonna be me? I wiped sweat from my face. You go. He laughed at me. No, man, you're lighter. I'll see how bad you screw it up. The others, Tanner and Alejandro, whipped out from behind us. They were halfway through another beer, shouting that we were pussies. So I stepped forward. I'd done this once before, a couple of summers back, and the memory was still sweet. Cold water, hard rush, everybody cheering. It could be done, and I'll do it again. I lined up, toes on the edge, heart banging. Then I sent it. For half a second, there was nothing but air, that full free fall. The river then swallowed me, the cold froth then swallowing me up next, turning me around, bubbles tearing past my face. When I broke the surface, I came up laughing. I made it. Hell yeah! Tanner yelled at me from above. Cole was already on the edge. 10 out of 10. Looks good, bro. He called at me. Hey, line it up straight. I shouted back at him. Don't overjump. But he was already gone. The sound he made when he hit the side was like a branch snapping, a flat, wet crack, then another. His body pinwheeled shoulder first into the opposite wall before vanishing into the water beside me. He had shattered his arms and legs on the way down, pinballing from one wall into the other. Cole! I drove toward him, right where he landed. The current pushed him under, limbs totally useless now. I caught him by the elbow and felt his arm splinter in my hand. He was still trying to use his arms and legs to tread water, despite them being broken all over. I could see blood staining the water around us. Holy shit. His face was white, his mouth was open and closing, but nothing was coming out, no scream, no talking. One of his arms was bent the wrong way entirely, but his leg, holy fuck, his leg, it just hung loose, a compound fracture poking through like a tent pole. Shit, dude, don't move, I said to him. Quit kicking, dude. He tried to speak, but he kept getting mouthfuls of water. I can't. I got you, I said, my hands slipping under his armpits. His body was shaking, broken all over. Every movement made this sound like bone scraping against bone. I kept pulling, kept talking, anything to keep him with me. Above, the others were screaming that they were calling 911 to hold him there. Cole's head was lolling back and forth. Don't. Then his face went underwater. I yanked his head back up, and the water around us was turning red quickly. It spread out in this big cloud, curling away downstream. I pressed his broken arm against his chest, trying to stop the bleeding. I felt him go limp from the pain. He was passing out before we even got to shore. I yelled at him to stay with me. His eyes then rolled back. He was hardly breathing. I heard sirens echoing somewhere above the canyon, fading in and out with the roar of the river. Cole was laying half in the water, half on the rocks, barely even conscious. I pressed my shirt against his leg, but the blood kept coming, bones poking through in 2 places. "Hang on, man, hang on, they're coming." He gave me the shaky laugh. "That sucked. What happened?" "You overshot it." "Yeah, guess I did." Alejandro yelled at us from the cliff, telling us the rescue's on the way, that they're cutting down the service trail. Cole tried to look over at him, but I held his head still. "Dude, don't move. It isn't worth it." He blinked, going in and out again. He looked like a smashed insect. "You promise me you won't let me drown." "You're not drowning, dumbass. You're not even in the water anymore." He then went silent. The river surged around us as Cole slipped fully into shock. The rescue team then showed up on the opposite ledge. Helmets, ropes, orange jackets. They shouted orders, started crossing the river, and within minutes, had him in the stretcher. I stepped back and let them take over. Cole would survive. Months of surgery, pins, rehab, but he made it. Both arms and both legs were broken. They said if I hadn't been down there to keep him afloat, he would have definitely drowned, died for sure. I actually went back to the box later that summer. There was a group of kids there talking about jumping in, but I noticed all of them were dry. "You guys jump yet?" I asked them. "Hell no, man. We heard a kid died here." That was actually shocking to hear it out loud, but words get twisted, you know. The rumors about Cole the rest of the year were pretty awful. "Yeah," was all I said to them. "Better be careful."
This is something that happened back when I was in high school. It was my sophomore year, and I remember that I was taking a gym class. It was a basic gym class where you would do a little bit of everything. One day in particular, we were doing some kind of cardio workout. At my high school, when I went there, they had a few different rooms that gym classes would use. There was the main basketball gyms, which were kind of in the center of the school towards the front. The weight room and then another exercise room were on one side of that by the locker rooms. Then, on the opposite side, there was this long hallway, and down there was this room called the cardio room. I think it was actually the old weight room back in the day, and then they moved the weight room to a larger and nicer space, and they changed this room to cardio. It had mostly machines like treadmills and bikes, but there were some weight machines as well, and they also had some ellipticals and other stuff. There were a few dumbbells and things like that, but most of the equipment in that room looked really old. So for some reason we were doing a kind of workout on the treadmills and bikes in that room, as well as jump ropes. I don't remember the whole workout, but basically we would all go at our own pace. When we had completed the workout, we would go into the main gym and play basketball, which was basically an open gym. The teacher went into the gym to oversee it. So we all did the workout in the cardio room. I remember that I was on the bike for a while taking my time. I wasn't in a real hurry to finish, even though I did enjoy basketball, but I worked out on my own as well as this class, so in gym class I would kind of just take it easy and be lazy, to be honest. None of the stuff we did was really that hard. About probably half the class finished before me. After the bike we had to do some jump rope work out there, and then when I was finally done with that, there was maybe 20 minutes left of class. So I left the cardio room to go to the gym, and when I did, all I would have to do was walk a ways down the hallway and then cross it. I finished the cardio workout and didn't really get done at the same time as anybody else. So I left the cardio room by myself and stepped out into the hallway. This hallway was a quiet one, and it was on the end of the old wing of the school, and not too many rooms were in use over there anymore. As I started walking down the hallway though, I saw something almost right away. There was a man, a grown man, trying to enter the doors to the gym. The same doors that I was planning to go through. The guy was tugging on the doors and they appeared to be locked. I had never seen this guy before and did not know who he was. He did not seem like a teacher at all. And the way that he was aggressively trying to open the doors gave me a bad feeling. So I turned and went the other way. There were other doors entering the same gym if you went around the corner. so I decided that's what I would do. The man did not seem to notice me at all, but I never really had to get that close to him, so I walked around the corner to the north end of the gym. When I got there, those doors were also locked. I was confused. I knocked on them once, but nobody answered right away. I didn't know what was going on, but it was possible that they had put the dividers up in the gym and nobody was in that area. So I decided to go back around to the cardio room where the rest of my class was. I made the walk past the north end of the gym and around to the old hallway. When I made it back into that hallway, I no longer saw the man at all. However, when I walked over to the cardio room, I tried the doors there and they were also locked. I should have stayed there and kept knocking, but I was so confused that I started to look around the hallway. That's when I heard footsteps from farther down, and I had a bad feeling. So I quickly turned and just walked the other way out of instinct, going back to the north end of the school. As I was walking, I heard something come over the school intercom. I couldn't hear it that clearly because you know how intercom systems are not always that clear, but I did hear the word lockdown. I was now realizing that the school must be in a lockdown, and that's why all the doors were locked. And somehow, some way, I had been trapped out in the hallways. I also realized that the man who I saw in the hallways trying to get in the gym was quite possibly part of this. So I walked faster now and went around the corner. I tried to enter the gym again, but it was still locked and nobody was answering the door. Then I heard footsteps behind me a ways back, so I quickly left that area. I went down a random hallway, and at that point I was getting nervous. I started quickly walking through more random hallways to try to get as far away from that guy as I could. After walking for a while and not hearing anything, I found a random classroom and I stopped and knocked on the door. I thought maybe they would let me in. However, once again, nobody was answering. As I was there knocking, I started to hear footsteps in one of the nearby hallways approaching me. Was the man coming after me? I knew that I needed to get out of there, and knocking on the door was only giving away my location, so I walked away from there quickly. I started going down more and more random hallways. Then I had the idea to leave the school entirely, so I headed for one of the back exits, which happened to be the closest one to me. However, when I got there, I tried opening the doors, but they were like locked from the inside. I didn't know what to do, so I turned around and kept going down hallways. The school was literally dead silent except me and this other guy. Every so often I would hear his footsteps in a nearby hallway. I was desperately trying to get away from him. When I was doing so, I almost went into a bathroom to hide, but I thought better of it. I figured it was too risky. If the man got in there, I would be cornered, so I kept walking. I don't know if I've ever been more nervous than that. I felt like I had to keep moving, and always be alert to where the man was, although I couldn't see him, only hear his footsteps in the distance. After a long time of walking, I thought that I lost him. I stopped hearing anything and I slowed down, but then I heard him again. So I walked faster and headed back to the front of the school. Then when I got towards the front doors, finally I saw something. There were a few police officers entering the school. When I saw them, I ran to them and finally was safe. They led me out of the school and I waited out front with about 10 police cars. I didn't know what was going on, but like 30 minutes later the cops told me that they caught the guy and things were safe. The lockdown ended and school resumed. The man thankfully hadn't harmed anyone, but he had gotten into the school and I guess he chased after several kids. I was mad about all the doors being locked, but I guess it was just bad timing. When I knocked on the doors, they probably thought that I was possibly the man. Either way, I'm glad that I got away from him, but I think it's really creepy how he was seemingly going after me. I used to be a substitute teacher part-time years ago. I did it for a few years and it was cool, but I moved on to a career where I don't have time to do that anymore. But in my time subbing, there was really one moment that I still think about sometimes as being scary. So I had to sub at a school that I had never been to before. I think it was my second year that I worked as a substitute teacher. So I arrived at the school and I didn't know my way around very well, but I was able to find the classroom all right. I was substitute teaching 3 classes that day, all in the same classroom. It was a pretty average-looking high school classroom for the most part. Somewhat old, but there was a teacher's desk at the front with a large whiteboard. A bunch of desks were scattered around the room, and some storage was at the back, with posters scattered around on the wall. So for the first couple of classes, things went by pretty smooth. Like normal, I didn't really have to do any actual teaching. It was more just me giving the students instructions of what they had to do, and then just sitting there and not doing much. After the first 2 classes of the day, there was a break in the action and I had an off period. That meant there was no class in my room, so I was just sitting by myself in it for the hour. During this time, I got up to use the restroom. Now, when I did this, I couldn't find the bathroom at first. The school was kind of hard to navigate around in, as it was pretty old. I walked down a couple of hallways before I finally found a restroom. As I was leaving the bathroom when I was done, I heard an announcement that the school was going into a lockdown. This was concerning to me, but I just figured that I would get back to my room and things would be fine. I had no clue what the lockdown was for, because now that I was back out in the hallways, they seemed completely empty and quiet. I wandered around to get back to my classroom and almost got lost, but thankfully made it. When I got back in the room, I closed the door, locked it, and then turned off the lights. Then I just sat at the main desk and went on my laptop. I was just waiting for the lockdown to hopefully be over soon, and I hoped that it was nothing serious. I tried to do some internet searches to find any information, but could not. And I didn't get any calls on the classroom phone either. So I sat there for a while in silence, curious as to what was going on. This went on for probably half an hour. Then there was a knock on my classroom door, which startled me. I got up and carefully walked over to the door. I saw a police officer standing on the other side. When I saw that, I opened up the door, curious as to what was happening. Immediately, he asked me to come out of the room. Then he told me that they had reason to believe that a suspect they were looking for was in my classroom. There were more police out in the hallway, and they made me leave the area. Later on, everything was cleared, and I was told that they caught the suspect. Then I went back to the classroom and finished my substitute teaching for the day. I found out that there had been a man who had broke into the school, and he was walking down the hallways, which caused the lockdown. I didn't find out why he did this or much else, but apparently when the lockdown was announced, the police got called and stuff, but they didn't know where the man had gone. Well, when I was gone to the bathroom, he walked right into my room because it was empty and I didn't lock the door. When I got back to my room, he was hiding in one of the back storage closets at the back end of the room. I hadn't noticed at all. The school staff and police saw security camera footage in the hallway of him entering the room, so that's how they knew that he was there. I had no idea. I can't believe that I was in a room with that guy for such a long time. The police were able to enter the rooms and eventually get him to come out of there. That was by far the craziest thing that ever happened when I was a substitute teacher. I was a student in high school a long time ago, but I still remember one particularly scary moment that happened, and I remember it very well, like it just happened yesterday. So it was a pretty normal school day. I was a junior at the time, and had got to school and then went to my classes. This was the third hour class of the day, which was history, I recall. The classroom was on the second floor of the school, and personally I liked it because we would watch a lot of videos there. The classroom also had these carpet floors, which I liked. But anyways, I remember that during class, the teacher said that there was a lockdown. Class was probably about halfway through at that point, and I remember wondering what the lockdown was about. It seemed to come out of nowhere. I don't recall hearing any announcement on the intercom or anything of that nature. So I remember that the teacher said that we all had to sit at the back of the class. The desks that we had could easily be moved, so everybody just ended up moving their desks towards the back, far away from the door. I sat on the side of the room kind of towards the back near the door, so I moved my desk back a little ways. So we all moved to the back end of the room, and then the teacher locked the door and turned off the lights. Most of us were obviously wondering what the lockdown was for, and we asked the teacher, but he said that he didn't know. So as we were sitting there for a while, some of us kids started to get bored, but I think we were also a little bit nervous as well. Then, suddenly, everything was interrupted by very loud bangs coming from the classroom door. We all looked to the door at once. The small window there was covered though. You could sort of see a shadow of somebody on the other side, but not very well at all. Not enough to tell any details about them, like if it was a man, a woman, or if they were large or small. Just enough to really tell that somebody was there on the other side. And these bangs on the door, they were not just a knock or anything like that. It was like this person was trying to break down the door or something. There were about 4 or 5 of these really loud bangs. I know that when I heard it, I was terrified. After the loud noises though, they stopped and the shadow left the doorway. Everybody in the classroom was dead silent. That silence continued for about 30 seconds, but it was only broken by more very loud bangs, this time coming from the wall on the other side of the classroom. It was like whoever was in the hallway simply moved locations. They banged there a few times, and then it went silent again. The class got eerily silent, with nobody talking at all, not even the teacher. Things were quiet for several minutes then. Finally, some people started quietly talking again, But it wasn't normal conversation. It was just talk trying to figure out what was possibly going on. Then, like 5 minutes after that, the loud bangs came back to the door, as whoever was doing it was back. They went on longer this time. There was like 10 of these very loud bangs on the door. I was scared that the door was going to break, but it held up well. Then the noises stopped and things went dead silent again after that. We were all terrified. For the next 20 or 30 minutes, I'm telling you, nobody said a word. You could hear a pin drop in that classroom. Then, all of a sudden, the phone rang in the classroom. The teacher answered it and didn't stay on the line for very long before hanging up. He then announced to us that the lockdown was over and assured us all that we were safe. I think everybody breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. Some of the students asked what happened at that point, but the teacher said he didn't know and they didn't tell him. We were all very curious. For the rest of the school day, things resumed to normal, but everyone was a little shook up from the craziness. However, I asked a bunch of people and nobody knew what happened. Over the next few days and weeks, there was nothing on the news or in the papers or anything. Nobody ever seemed to find out what the lockdown was about or what happened. I still don't know. Was it some intruder or an angry student or what? I'm not sure, but I know that it was a really scary experience. This happened when I was in high school. I was a 17-year-old girl and in my senior year. I enjoyed high school and had a lot of friends and overall did well in my classes. The school that I attended was very large with over 1,000 students enrolled. During the time, I lived with my parents and siblings in a pretty typical neighborhood and house. That's the background for this, and it all started sometime pretty early on in the school year. I had an Instagram account and my friends and I were pretty active on there and would post pictures and stories sometimes. A lot of people from my school followed me, but there were some other people as well, some people that I didn't even know. I had made my page when I was like in middle school, so I had it for a long time. Every now and then, some creepy guy would message me with either some scam or some creep trying to hit on me. I would just ignore them and sometimes block them. So one day, I remember that this random guy on Instagram started messaging me. I saw that he was following me, but I was not following him. I did not know who he was, but looking at his profile picture, he appeared much older. He said hi to me, but I did not respond. However, I think that a few days after that, he started sending more messages. He asked me where I lived and asked me if we could hang out, but I still didn't reply. But the man was persistent. He asked if I lived in the city that I lived in, mentioning it. Then once more, he asked if we could hang out or something, and he sent a bunch of question marks. This didn't make me nervous or anything, because in my pictures, it was not hard to find out where I lived. I literally had my high school tagged in some of my posts and things like that. It was not a really small city, so there's no way that he would find me or anything. But still, it was annoying how he would not leave me alone, so I blocked him. After that, I didn't hear from him for a little while, but unfortunately, it was only a few days later that I saw him again on Instagram. It was now a different account that he was using. I wouldn't have been able to tell that it was him at first, but when he sent me a message, it gave him away. He said something like, "Why did you block me? I want to see you. Can I come over?" This time, I finally responded. I said in all caps, "Leave me alone, you creep. I don't want anything to do with you." Then I blocked him again. I figured that that should send the message that I wasn't interested and it would make it loud and clear. And after that, I didn't hear from him for the rest of the day. The following day, I went to school like normal. I was sitting in one of my first classes of the day when I saw that I got another Instagram message. I was instantly suspicious that it was the same guy again, just making another account, because nobody else was really messaging me that much at the time. It was once again another new profile. The message said, "I want to see you now. Leave your class." I said, "Make all the accounts you want. I'm just going to keep blocking you." But the guy responded again saying, "I am here to see you." Now, when he said that, I didn't know what he meant. I didn't respond, but instead just blocked him. Probably 5 minutes later, the school went into a lockdown. There was an announcement, and in my class, the teacher turned off the lights and locked the doors. Most of us students were confused. At first, I didn't connect the dots, but pretty quickly after, I did. I wondered if the man actually was here to see me. We all sat in the classroom, mostly quiet, for a pretty long time. There was no information given to us about why we were in a lockdown. It lasted for maybe 45 minutes if I had to guess, and then thankfully it was over. At that point, a lot of people were obviously curious. The word quickly spread, and I was able to find out. Sure enough, it was that guy who was harassing me on Instagram. He was easily able to find out where I attended high school because of my Instagram profile. So he shockingly showed up and walked into the school trying to find me. He did not know where my classes were or where my locker was or anything, but the school staff quickly saw that he didn't belong and locked the place down. The man got trespassed and I had to go to the office and then to the police station to file a restraining order. I didn't know that the guy lived in the area at all, and as it turns out, he didn't. He drove over an hour just to see me, which I can't believe. I still am in shock that it happened, but thankfully I haven't seen him or heard from him since then. This happened during high school. I was a senior and it was my first hour of the day. For that class, a big part of it was doing these projects. We would basically have like a big project every 2 weeks or something like that. One thing my school had was this hallway at the southeast end of the school where there were all these study rooms. They were small rooms with just like 4 tables, 2 computers, and a few chairs, and that was pretty much it. You could go into these rooms and study pretty much any time, and our teacher would have our groups break out into these study rooms sometimes. My partner for this project was a guy named Brandon who was pretty cool, and we were friends in high school. On this day of class, I think it was a Friday, which was typically an easier and more chill day. It was mostly a work day, and the teacher gave us the option to work on our projects in class or in a study room. I remember that he also said that we could do homework for other classes if we wanted, because the overall project was running a little bit ahead of schedule, and we were doing well. Brandon and I were the only people in the class of like 15 to choose to go to a study room. Everyone else stayed in the classroom to work or hang out there. So we went down the hallways and got to one of the study rooms, and they were all empty, so we took one on the end. We did some work for the project and also just hung out and talked and played on our phones and stuff. At one point though, we heard this noise come over the school intercom system. It wasn't quite the bell sound, and also class was nowhere near being over, so it got our attention. The next thing we heard was an announcement saying that the school was being locked down and to follow procedure. Brandon and I wondered if we should leave the study room and go back to our classroom or just stay there. For some reason, we decided to stay there. We weren't really sure what to do though, so we just turned out the lights. The door had no lock on it, so we couldn't do anything. But I think that Brandon and I were not that nervous about being in a lockdown. We figured that it was probably nothing. Pretty much we quieted down, but we continued to talk and hang out and just wait for the lockdown to be over. We even did some more work on our project. After maybe like 10 minutes into the lockdown, we heard footsteps coming down the hallway. We obviously didn't know who it was, but I kinda hoped and assumed that it was someone who worked at the school. But it was also then that the thought occurred to me that maybe we were in some type of danger. The footsteps got closer and closer, and Brandon and I quietly whispered until whoever was there got real close. Then we shut up and went completely silent. It seemed as though whoever was there was going to go right to our door and open it. But instead, the footsteps walked past and they continued down the hallway. We both felt a little better at that point, maybe a little too good, because Brandon then said that he wanted to see who it was, so he got up and walked over to the door. From the window, he couldn't see that far, so he then opened the door. I also looked out when he did because I was curious too. What we saw was this man who did not work at the school and was wearing a hooded jacket concealing most of his head. He was walking in the opposite direction and much farther down the hallway. He was also definitely not a student. But when we opened the door, he heard it, stopped, and turned around. When he saw us, both of our reactions was just to run. Brandon and I took off down the hallway. It was possibly the fastest that I've ever run in my life. We went down that hallway, turned the corner, and ran down another one. Finally, we arrived back at our classroom, and both of us knocked on the door and yelled for our teacher to open it. Thankfully, within seconds, he did so and let us back in. We got in the classroom and quickly locked the door behind us. The man did not try to get into the classroom or anything though. I'm not sure where he went. The lockdown lasted for about another hour. Then finally, it was over. The man had been found in the school and was arrested. I never found out what he was doing or how he got in the school, but that was a really crazy experience.
I grew up in a holler just outside of Swords Creek, West Virginia, where the hills cradle you like a mother but don't do a thing to take care of you. Our town wasn't much. One gas station, a post office, and a church that doubled as the town's social center. It was the kind of place where kids played in the woods until dusk, and adults gathered for potlucks every Sunday after service. Normal, at least as normal as life could be out here. But boy, did people talk. There were stories about lights in the sky, strange creatures lurking by the creek, old curses tied to the coal mines. None of it ever amounted to anything real though, just to talk and keep the cold nights interesting. That's what I continue to tell myself anyway, something to keep us kids in line out there. Of all the oddities about my childhood, the baptisms were what stuck with me the most. They weren't strange to anybody else, but my family and friends treated them like another rite of passage, as natural as learning to fish or gut a deer, but to me, they always felt off. Swords Creek wasn't just some lazy little stream either. Its waters churned with ancient anger. When the church had baptisms, the congregation would line up along the banks, singing hymns that sounded louder, harsher against the rush of that water. I watched my younger brother get dunked there, his skinny arms flailing as our pastor held him down longer than I thought was necessary. My aunt called it the Holy Spirit moving throughout him, but it looked a lot more like fear to me. My mom and dad told me that I was baptized down there too, but I personally don't remember it. By the time my cousin Hannah, her turn came, I thought I was numb to the strangeness of it all, but I was wrong. Her baptism was very different. It wasn't just about religion or tradition. It was something else entirely. I remember that Sunday like a stain in my head. It started out just like any other. The air smelled of rain-soaked woodland. The fog hugged the hills so tightly you could barely even see the tops. We gathered up in the church, its clapboard walls groaning as the pews filled with the usual faces, except for a few that I did not recognize. The strangers sat in the back, their eyes scanning the room like they were cataloging us. They didn't sing or bow their heads during opening prayer. Just sat there with these blank, heavy stares. Something about them set my teeth on edge, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Then the service started, and that's when I knew something was very off. The hymns were not the ones that we always sang. These were harsher, more guttural. The sermon wasn't the usual soft-spoken call to love thy neighbor. Pastor Bill was practically shouting, his voice cracking as he paced back and forth. He spoke about sin like it was a sickness eating at our insides. His words were cutting sharper than I'd ever heard before. When the sermon ended, a murmur then went throughout the congregation as the older members, Pastor Bill, the deacons, even my dad, stood up and then disappeared into a back room. They returned moments later, dressed in these long white robes with tall pointed hoods. I'd never seen those robes before, and it didn't sit right with me. They looked far too clean, too ceremonial, and far too strange for this little mountain church. Hannah, bless her heart, was only 10. She didn't understand what was happening any more than I did. She sat between her parents, her small hands twisting nervously in her lap. When Pastor Bill called her name, she flinched like a startled bird. We all rose then, the entire congregation, and followed them out the door and down at the creek. The air felt heavy, like a storm was brewing, even though the sky around us was clear. My gut told me to turn back, but I couldn't. I didn't. I had to see what was going to happen. That creek was louder than I ever remember it being. Its roar was drowning out the soft murmurs of all the congregation as we all lined up near the bank. The strangers from the church were hanging back, watching everything with those dead eyes. Pastor Bill and the men in white robes waded off into the water, their movements slow, deliberate, like they were trying not to disturb something lurking below the surface. Hannah was clutching her mother's hand. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the swirling water. I felt a pang of guilt for not stepping in, for not telling her parents that this whole thing felt wrong to me. But what could I say? To everybody else, this was sacred, God's work. But to me, it felt like we were trespassing. When they reached the center of the creek, Pastor Bill raised his hand and began to sing. Only, it wasn't a hymn, or not any hymn I'd ever heard before. His voice was twisted into a chant. The words were guttural and strange. Then the other men joined in, their voices clashing, overlapping until it sounded less like music and more like a ritual. Hannah's mom then nudged her toward the water, her face soft but insistent. Hannah shook her head. Her lip was trembling. Her mother whispered something that I couldn't hear, and Hannah stepped forward. I could see the tears already welling up in her eyes. As she waded in, the current was pulling at her legs. The congregation began humming along with the chant. It was low, deep, almost like a growl. I turned to my dad, hoping that he'd notice how wrong this was, but he just stood there, eyes glassy, lips moving, as if he was mouthing along all the words with the others. All the adults looked the same, entranced, like puppets on a string. Hannah was shaking as the men took her arms, each one holding her like she might bolt at any second. Pastor Bill then placed a hand on her forehead, his chanting growing louder, louder, and louder until he pushed her under. At first, it was normal like any other time. Baptisms always kind of look a little rough, people thrashing, water flying everywhere. But as the seconds ticked by, Hannah's arms started flailing, and it was clear this wasn't right or normal. She was fighting. Her legs were kicking wildly. Her head was twisting against the pastor's grip. They were holding her under for far too long. "Stop it!" I shouted, my voice cracking, but nobody even turned to look at me. It was like I didn't exist. I stepped forward, my boots sinking into the muddy bank. "She's gonna drown!" I screamed, but the chanting grew louder, drowning me out. Hannah broke the surface for a moment, gasping and coughing, but before she could actually catch her breath, he shoved her back under. Her eyes found mine for a split second, wide, pleading. I'll never forget the look on her face. It wasn't even fear anymore. It was just pure despair. I grabbed a rock from the ground, rough, jagged, and hurled it at the men in the water. It missed, splashing harmlessly near their feet, but it was enough to make them hesitate. Before I could grab another, I heard voices, shouting, laughing, coming from upstream. I turned and saw them, a group of people floating down the creek on inner tubes, a bizarre contrast to the chaos that was unfolding before me. They had coolers tied to their rafts, cans of beer in their hand, and a speaker blaring some country music. At first, I assumed they would just float right by, oblivious, but as they got closer, they noticed the scene. The music cut off, their laughter turned into nervous chuckles, and one of them, a man with a sunburnt face, called out, "The hell are y'all doing? Some kind of cult thing?" The tension snapped like a rubber band. The chanting stopped, the men in the water turned and looked at the intruders, their faces unreadable under the shadows of their hoods. "Y'all need to take your Jesus party somewhere else," the man on the raft said, tossing an empty beer can toward the congregation. It landed with a hollow thunk on the shore. That seemed to break the spell. The congregation began to murmur, shifting uncomfortably. The men inside the water brought Hannah up and guided her back to the bank. Their movements were stiff, robotic. She was coughing, her small body trembling as her parents wrapped her up in a towel. The floaters kept jeering, throwing bits of trash and laughing. I hated them for it, but at the same time, I was very grateful. They seemingly disrupted whatever was happening, shattering that eerie rhythm of the ritual. Pastor Bill didn't say a word as he climbed out of the water, his white robe clinging to his body. He just looked over at the floaters, then at the congregation, and finally at me. His eyes lingered on mine, dark and empty. Before he turned and walked back toward the church, his eyes lingered on mine, dark and empty, before he turned around and walked back toward the church. The strangers from church disappeared after the baptism, loading up into a pair of muddy trucks that rumbled down the dirt road, and now out of sight. Never saw them again either. They were definitely not from around here, that much was clear. I asked my dad later who they were, but he just muttered something about visiting missionaries and then changed the subject almost immediately. That night I lay there in bed, trying to piece it all together. The chanting, the way adults seemed entranced, the eerie timing of the river floaters, and none of it made any kind of sense. It felt like I'd stumbled into something ancient, something I was never supposed to see. Hannah didn't come back to school for almost a week after that, and when she finally returned, she was a lot quieter, a lot more withdrawn. Her usual spark was now gone, replaced by skittishness that made her jump at loud noises or sudden movements. She wouldn't talk to me about the baptism, no matter how much I pressed her. A few months later, her and her parents ended up moving away. They said it was for work, but I overheard my mom whispering to my aunt that Hannah had started having episodes, needed some kind of special care. Didn't sound right to me. Hannah had literally always been the healthiest kid that I knew. The baptisms over at Swords Creek continued, but they were never the same. The robes and that chanting were gone, replaced by the familiar hymns and gentle sermons of my childhood, but I refused to go. I stopped attending. Every time I heard the creeks roar, I would see Hannah's terrified face in my mind and felt the weight of Pastor Bill's gaze. Years later, long after I'd left West Virginia, I stumbled across this old photo of our church congregation. It was tucked into a box of keepsakes my mom had sent me after she downsized. In the picture, everybody was smiling. Everybody except for the strangers that day. They stood at the edge of the group, their faces hard and blank. Something about the photo made my skin crawl. I flipped it over, hoping for some kind of explanation, and only found a single word scrawled in faded ink. Witnesses. I called my mom that night, photo still in hand. Asked her if she remembered those people, the one who'd worn the robes and chanted in the creek. There was this long pause on the line before she finally spoke.
You know, I don't recall. I don't remember at all.
And that part really creeped me out, but what more could I do? It was now just a memory, something weird, and memories are a hard thing to trust. My resources were pretty much exhausted, so I didn't pursue it further. Plus, I don't think I really wanted to know. Something about the whole thing just gave me the creeps, and I was content to just let it be a weird thing in the back of my mind. And to this day, folks are still baptized in those waters. I grew up in southern West Virginia. If you've never been out in those mountains at night, it's hard to explain the kind of darkness that actually lives there. It isn't just the absence of light, it's heavy, primordial. The woods swallow everything up, the footsteps, the road noise between towns, even the sky sometimes. Once the sun drops behind those ridges, the forest becomes its own world. People from outside think they understand the woods because they've gone camping or hiked a state park trail during the day or something, but the woods in Appalachia after midnight feel very different, ancient, like something has been there long before you arrive and doesn't like to see other visitors. My story takes place about 2 or 3 years ago. My buddy Mark was over at my place one night. We'd been doing what we usually do, watching UFC fights, talking trash over Xbox, eating whatever the hell junk food that we could find in the kitchen. This was a classic pastime stuff for me back then, eating Twinkies, drinking beer, shadowboxing at the TV while people got knocked out cold. By the time we realized how late it got, it was well past midnight. The fights were over, the house was quiet, and we both had that wired, restless feeling that comes from a high-energy kind of night. Mark suggested that we go for a walk. There's a trail not far from my house that cuts through a dense patch of woods. Nothing special, just a narrow dirt path that people use during the day to walk their dogs or get a little bit of exercise. But once the sun goes down, hardly anybody goes out there. Not because anything has ever officially happened, it's just one of those places, you know? A dark, isolated trail through the woods. Bad area for an accident or an animal attack. We figured we'd walk out there, smoke a joint, burn off into exhaustion. Living where I lived, being young, all pumped up, we didn't really give it a second thought. We owned the area between our houses. Not in a legal sense, more like caveman kind of rights. The entrance to the trail is only a few minutes from my place, but once you step off into those trees, the road disappears really quickly. The canopy is thick, and the deeper you go, the darker it actually gets. The canopy is thick, and the deeper you go, the darker it gets. Our phone light barely even cut through it. Every few steps, dry branches would crack off like gunfire under your shoes, and the sound would echo in every direction. I felt like a dumbass for not bringing an actual flashlight. I'd say around 30 minutes later, we reached this spot that we could chill in. There's a stretch where the trees open just enough that the trail widens up on both sides, so we just stopped there. Mark pulls out the weed and the papers and rolled up while we were talking about the fights and whatever dumb stuff that had been going on that week. The whole time around us, the forest was alive with noise, and I mean alive. Crickets, frogs, things rustling through the leaves, branches snapping somewhere deeper in the brush, and scratching up against the tree bark. You hear that kind of thing in the woods all the time, but at night, it really felt crowded. Almost like every animal in the forest was up and active, which was super weird. I mentioned it to Mark. He just shrugged though, said something like, probably a raccoon or deer spooking everything. At the time, I just kind of agreed with him. Didn't seem like that big of a deal. We finished the joint, flicked the roach into the dirt, and started walking back the way we came. I think we took maybe 10 steps when the forest just went completely silent. It wasn't subtle, it didn't taper. It was as if somebody just pulled out the remote control, hit the mute button on everything around us. What had just been ripe, rich chatter between critters was cut off, as if it had never been there at all. If you spend time in the woods, you know how strange that feels. Mark stopped walking beside me. "So that's weird," he said. But before I could answer him back, we heard the voice. It came from somewhere behind us in the trees, and at first we both assumed it was a person, but the sound had this human shape to it, but the longer it went on, the less sense it actually really made. The voice was deep and very, very distorted. The closest thing I can compare it to is one of those cheap children's toys with the dying battery. The kind with that little speaker that crackles and warps the words. It had that same robotic wobble to it. Pitch would rise and then fall in these unnatural tones. Something was trying to imitate speech without understanding how it worked. It was talking or trying to. The sounds didn't form words that I could understand, just this shaky, broken string of noises. I remember I wanted to move, but every muscle in my body was frozen, petrified from top to bottom, as if I was under some kind of spell. Mark looked over at me with horror in his eyes, and I could see the same thought forming in his head that was in mine. We shouldn't be here. We turned slowly and started making our way back. Now, I could have broken on, left his ass in the dust, but I was too scared. What if I get ahead? Whatever this thing is nabs one of us. What if we get separated? Lots of creepy thoughts kept me going the same speed as Mark. At first, we just kept it at this fast walk, but the voice kept going. The moment we moved, it continued behind us in the exact same tone and volume, matching us step by step. It never faded, but it also never got any closer either, just staying there continuously. It felt like it was mocking us, but regardless, I started to sweat really bad under my clothes. I think maybe 20 seconds went by, and we just started sprinting. Branches whipped our arms as we tore down the trail, our phone lights bouncing everywhere. My lungs started burning almost immediately, but neither of us slowed down because how could we? We were stoned. We had no idea what we were dealing with, and the thought of slowing down meant certain death. The voice followed us the entire time. Same volume, same distance, like it was glued to us. But we could never understand a single syllable. No matter how fast we ran or how long we ran, that warped, broken voice just kept repeating those strange sounds directly behind us. That was the moment real fear set in. Not the nervous kind that you get when you're spooking yourself in the woods with your friends. I mean, the kind of fear that hits your gut, tells you something is deeply wrong. The uncanny valley, or whatever it was called. I could hear the voice, but I couldn't hear the footfalls, thrashing leaves. Nothing to indicate movement. Was this thing floating in the fucking air behind us? Was it purely just some kind of disembodied voice? I was spiraling. We were in danger, and I remember thinking that very clearly. I don't remember how long we ran for. It felt like forever, but was probably only a few minutes. Finally, we saw the faint glow from the road ahead through the trees. The trail exit and my house just beyond it. We stumbled off into the gravel clearing, both of us bent over trying to catch our breath. Felt like daggers in my lungs after that joint. The woods behind us were quiet again, though for about 5 seconds. Then whatever the hell it was, screamed. The sound exploded out of the trees behind us like something straight from hell. Not far down that trail, right there on top of us. I've lived in these mountains my entire life. I know what all the animals sound like. Coyotes, foxes, bobcats, even mountain lions. People online love to say those screams that you hear are animals. I'm telling you right now, that was not an animal. It sounded human, but filled with agony and scorn. That's all I can really describe it as. It nearly made my ears bleed. Mark actually dropped to his knees. Birds burst out of the trees overhead in panic, wings flapping in every direction, suddenly startled awake by that sudden intrusion. And for another minute or so, neither of us moved, until we kind of caught ourselves and started running again. My house was only a couple of minutes down the road, and we made it there in record time. I don't remember talking about anything, but I remember locking the doors and getting a pair of golf clubs from the closet, something to put us at ease. My hands were shaking so badly every time I gripped that handle. We spoke about it a little bit, but every time we did, we'd hear a rustle outside or a creak on the porch. We thought it was listening, so we stayed quiet and just watched fucking shit on TV. Eventually, we both passed out in the living room, woke up alive in the morning, and that was that. I walked Mark out to his car. He buzzed home, and we never stepped on that trail again. In the years since, I've only told maybe 3 people about that night. Most of them, of course, laugh it off or say it was in fact an animal making those weird noises. Maybe, but I was there. Mark was there. We know what happened. I've spent my whole life in these woods, and I've never heard anything like that before. Not on a hike, not on a hunt, not on a fucking camping trip. And thank God I've never heard it since. Our house sat alone on a rise of land just outside a small railroad town. That kind of place that felt stuck in time, like it was out of a Steinbeck novel. You could step onto the porch at night and hear nothing but wind moving through the grass and the low distant hum of the freight cars rolling from miles away. The property sloped gently down on all sides, flattening into wide fields and thin strips of woodland that seemed to stretch on and on forever. There were no close neighbors, no streetlights, no nearby traffic. At night, the dark pooled around our property as if it had somewhere else to go. Inside, things were ordinary, quiet, comfortable. This wasn't a place that we were afraid of during the day. It was super normal. It may have been very isolated, but that didn't give us any reason to be scared of anything out there. And that was true for most of my childhood. This wasn't the first house that I can remember, but it's the one that we spent the most time in. My parents had bought it when my brother and I were still in elementary school, the property that they always dreamed of, and it was closer to the big job opportunity that my dad had. They made the purchase and we got moved in. Dad immediately started going to work. My brother and I were quick to explore when we weren't at school, and my mom made the place very beautiful. They bought the house from a man that lived alone. I don't remember specifically a lot about that guy, but I remember meeting him once or twice. He seemed nice, normal-looking guy, thin hair, thin frame, polo shirt and slacks. He said he was cashing in on the real estate market and also moving for some kind of job opportunity himself. He spent some time showing them upgrades he'd made to the house while they went through the motions of the deal, and this was mostly a private sell. And then one day, the house was ours, and I never saw that previous owner again. He was packed up and moved on, living his new life. I vaguely remember him not having a lot of stuff, or maybe he'd already moved most of it. Things were incredibly normal the entire time during the deal and after. No scary animals in the yard, no ghost inside the house. Our new lives began to unfurl. Every so often, my mother would mention something strange that she'd heard after we all were in bed, though. She described it as this dull metallic knocking, slow, rhythmic, and hollow. Not loud or frantic or anything, just this steady, irregular sound that seemed to come from somewhere beneath the bedroom, beneath the house itself. She said she heard it most in the morning, just after Dad left for work, and when we were still sleeping before school. She said she could also hear it around midday, sometimes when she was home alone. She, like anyone else, would assume it was the plumbing, maybe an old pipe shifting, perhaps the furnace cycling on and off. Houses make noises, you know, especially at odd hours. They settle, breathe, adjust to the weather outside. They expand and contract with the temperature changing. It's wood and metal groaning, nothing more. But this didn't sound anything like that. It wasn't a bang or a knocking pipe. It wasn't a creak or a groan. This was the unmistakable sound of metal striking metal, and it was well below the house. It wasn't something she heard beneath the flooring when she was laying in bed, head pressed to the pillow. It sounded like it was escaping from the center of the earth. Again and again, she told herself it was nothing, told herself it had to be something mechanical, perhaps even an echo from the distant train tracks, reverbing through an underground chasm. Eventually, after enough nights of listening to it, she taught herself to just ignore it. For that entire first year, she was the only one who ever mentioned hearing anything of the sort. My brother and I were hard sleepers, the way young kids do. Our rooms were on the opposite side of the house, and whatever lived below my parents' room never seemed to wander too far. If it made noise anywhere else, we would have noticed. The nights passed, the seasons changed, the knocking faded into a story that she would only occasionally bring up, half joking and half unsettled. Until the night that I actually ended up hearing it myself. I was older then, old enough to stay up late on my own and keep my own curiosities. The house was dead silent, no television, no taps on, no other machines running, not even a touch of wind beyond the exterior of the house. It was unmistakable inside that kind of vacuum. It was faint at first, so faint that I would almost dismiss it any other time. A dull, distant talk. I held my breath, reminded immediately of every story, every other sound my mother had described. This was exactly what she'd been talking about. A second knock would follow, slightly louder, hollow yet flat at the same time, and it continued on. The sound came from beneath the floor, not from the basement, not from the crawl space. It felt deeper than that, as though it were coming from the very crust of the earth. I lay there frozen, pulse thudding in my ears, waiting for a mole man to explode through the floor of my bedroom. Another knock came, then another, each spaced far enough apart that I found myself counting the seconds between them. 10, 12, 15. It reminded me of some kind of pipe work, like there was a plumber working on something well below the foundation of the house. I got out of bed and padded down the hall to my mother's room. I didn't knock, just pushed the door open and stood there in the dark until they began to stir. "I hear it," I whispered, and both my parents sat up slowly listening themselves. And so we all lay there together for nearly an hour, nobody speaking, just counting those soft, patient taps rising up from beneath the house. There were other sounds too, and my mom casually explained each one. A line of identical taps. She would nod. "I used to hear that one a lot." Bang, bang, bang. Slow and metered out. She would nod again. "That's the most common one I hear." A different sound, like something being stretched or open, but still the sound of metal. She described it as tearing. She said she heard that one the most least often, almost never over the last couple of years. After that night, we didn't joke about it anymore. Dad was ready to call the cops, but he didn't know what to tell them. We also began to notice other things over the next couple of months. We did in fact think the house was haunted. Footsteps sometimes, slow creepy pacing that echoed faintly up through the floorboards, far away and distant, never close enough to pinpoint or to follow. A soft slide of something shifting against the wood, like something being rolled up. A dry cough that didn't belong to anybody inside the house. Sometimes even a sneeze, sharp and sudden, clean cut through the stillness of the night. Each time, whoever heard it assumed it was somebody else. My brother would think it was me. I thought it was my parents. My parents would assume it was one of us. It wasn't until we began hearing things while completely alone that pieces started to rearrange themselves. I distinctly remember being home alone, no question about it, when I heard that same metal clanging, followed by a pause, then a grunt, then more clanging. My parents were gone, my brother was out riding his bike, and yet it sounded like there was somebody hard at work just beneath my feet. One afternoon, my mother was home by herself, holding the laundry in the living room. The house was quiet, the air was heavy with heat, and she bent down to gather up and pile some clothes. She heard footsteps cross the office floor above her, slow and careful steps, navigating the interior of the home. She called my name. She got no answer. She called my brother's name. Still nothing. She stood there listening as the footsteps moved down the hallway, paused, and then faded away. That evening when she told us about it, everybody was dead quiet. We'd been waiting for something like this to happen. My brother and I had both been at school. My father was at work. And she knew that, but wanted us all to be aware that there may in fact be somebody coming in and out of our house. Dad wanted to call the police again. My mother actually agreed, and she said that she in fact would have had she actually seen a person in the house at the time. Until they actually had evidence of some kind, calling the cops would just make them look crazy. That was the first time we admitted out loud that there was something truly bizarre happening inside our home. No more delusions about train echoes through the underground cave networks. There was something going on that had some form of an explanation, something that was more than likely human. Once that idea took root, the house seemed to go dormant, as though whatever lived beneath us finally realized that it was in fact being heard. By that afternoon, we were banging pots and pans all over the vents, playing loud music, yelling at the top of our lungs that whoever was making noise had to stop. Otherwise, this would be the new normal. We decided to fight fire with fire. The changes came slowly and they were not to our liking. A cabinet door was left open when nobody remembered using it. Shoes shifted from the mudroom to the hallway. A dining chair pulled back at an odd angle, as if somebody had stood up quietly and then forgot to push it in. The fucked up part, it was honestly most likely us. We were suddenly hypercritical of our own lifestyle and behavior, and any little stray observation must have been the phantom that was haunting us, right? It wasn't dramatic, none of it was enough to cause alarm on its own, but it happened often enough that we began to second guess ourselves. We stopped asking what happened and would begin asking who did it. At night, the sounds would return with new variety. The knocking still came from below, but it was no longer followed in any kind of pattern. Sometimes it came in clusters, 2 or 3 dull taps in quick succession. Other times it sounded like something striking the underside of the house, then sliding away, metal scraping with every movement. Footsteps would follow, traveling distances that didn't quite line up with the layout of the house. Lying awake in the dark, I began to recognize the difference between ordinary house noises and the other stuff. It was actually very easy to differentiate. Once, I never told my parents this. I heard a voice, talking, words faintly trickling out from somewhere. It stopped and then I never heard it again. After that, sleep would become very inconsistent for me. I remember thinking our house was poised over this portal to hell, and I thought I was hearing the devil himself. We began comparing notes every single day. My mother asked if anybody had been awake late. My brother asked if somebody had come home early. I asked questions I already knew the answers to. My father dismissed it all. We needed somebody to really investigate. He worked long hours and slept deeply. Whatever was happening affected him the least. And this only made the house feel divided. Just before sunrise one morning, I awoke to the sound of movement outside my window. Not the wind, not an animal, but that same metered steps that I'd heard before from under the house. Fog lay thick across the field, low and unmoving. At the edge of the tree line, where the land dipped into shadow, I saw a man standing still facing the house. He was tall and narrow, his posture slouched, as if tired or injured. I couldn't see his face, only the outline of him against the gray morning light. I stayed perfectly still, gripped by that sudden certainty that if I moved, he would notice me through that window. After a long moment, he turned and walked into the woods, disappearing smoothly. And of course, I thought maybe I was seeing things. It was early, foggy, shadowy. It was possible I was seeing some kind of trick of the light. By the time I woke my mother and pulled her to the window, the fog had thinned and the tree line now stood empty. She didn't tell me I imagined it. She looked spooked herself, ready to load us up and leave the property if needed. Later that day, my brother would admit that he'd seen somebody on the property as well, early in the morning. He hadn't said anything at the time and assumed it was a hunter or somebody just cutting through our land. After that, we did not feel as isolated. My dad actually did make a call to the police. They looked around the edge of the property and didn't find much, even poked around the footings of the house. They said they'd come back if we called, but for now, there was nothing that told them there was a person bothering us or loitering, trespassing, whatever. The sounds inside the house did not stop, but they were different. The knocking came from new places, the footsteps crossed beneath rooms they never had before. One night, my mother heard a sneeze directly below her bed, wet and restrained, like somebody doing everything they could to stay quiet. Of course, we checked the next morning. The basement, the crawl space, exterior vents, the yard, nothing disturbed. No footprints, no signs of entry. Dad had the cops come out once again and they went through the same motions and found nada, zip. Now, all of that should have been comforting, but it just deepened the rabbit hole. Around the same time, helicopters began passing overhead, not often and not directly above the house, but always low, always following the same pattern across the open back base of our hill. Occasionally, a military plane would follow, close enough to rattle the windows. It wasn't as low, but it made that similar loop. Each time they passed, the house went totally mute. No knocking, no footsteps, or any kind of movement. It seemed like whatever was living beneath us picked up on the presence of the aircraft, and it was super weird and started to make my head spin. How big was this? How deep was this? But one day we made a breakthrough, and it didn't happen all at once. My brother mentioned it over lunch. He was quiet for a moment, pushing food around his plate, then said something that made all of us stop what we were doing. "There are doors in the woods," he said. "Behind the house, buried." My mother asked him what he meant by that. He told us last year him and his friend had wandered into the trees behind our property. They found a shallow depression in the land, something that didn't look natural once you noticed it. At the bottom, half hidden by brush and dirt, were two metal doors set into the ground, flat, heavy, and sealed shut. They didn't open them. They didn't even try. Something about them had felt dangerous to them. They obviously weren't meant to be found. He went on saying that they continued to look around the area and found a second door further along the hill. This one had a single hatch door that was round and sunk into the earth itself. At the time, he assumed they were some kind of storm shelter, old utility access, something totally routine, you know? He hadn't really thought about them again until the knocking started to really haunt us, and then the chopper patrols came in almost that exact same area. It then occurred to him that it could be a military installation out there or something. That afternoon, we ended up pulling up some satellite images, zoomed out and zoomed in, and got our own orientation. Just a few adjustments and boom, there they were. Two rectangular shapes just beyond the tree line, partially obscured by foliage, symmetrical, unmistakably man-made, positioned not far from where the man had been standing that morning, facing our house. And the round one was a little harder to find, but it appeared to be there as well. There was no roads that led to them, no structures nearby, nothing that explained why they were there or what connected them to us. But from Mom's best guess, they were maybe 1,200 feet away from where we stood now. The house now felt like a ticking time bomb. Mom was furious that my brother hadn't said anything sooner, and the knocking did not stop. It actually began to sound closer, as if whatever had stayed deep beneath us had begun to move upward, testing the space. Sometimes the taps would come directly beneath the center of the house. Other times they followed the slope of the land like something traveling underground. The nights when helicopters passed overhead, the knocking would go away. The nights when the skies were clear, it would return, soft and firm, like somebody checking a piece of fruit. My mother actually started keeping notes, times, dates, sounds, and patterns, and my father refused to look at them, to acknowledge it all. He told us our imagination was getting away from us, said there were reasonable explanations for everything, old infrastructure, geological noises, coincidences. Every now and again, he would hear something and I could see that flicker of doubt in his eyes. He was also the one that insisted on dragging the police out here not once, but twice. He knew what he heard, it's just that the police didn't search to uncover anything. And for a simple man like my father, that was enough. That was all the answers that he needed. But even he began locking the doors, all hours of the day. And we never went to the doors inside the woods. It honestly felt like crossing a line that we couldn't uncross. It felt unholy. Perhaps if we were out there, they'd be open and something would drag us underneath the surface, show us exactly how it made all those noises. And the presence continued to linger. Sometimes late at night, I just lie there awake and listen, not to the house, but to the land beneath it. I began to imagine the space under us not as empty earth, but as something hollowed out. Long corridors, reinforced walls, maybe even a city. Dwarves tinkering around, mining iron and tin from the rich veins, and forged empires inside the darkness. I had a lot of wild dreams like this for all of my middle school years. And once, just before falling asleep, I too heard the cough directly below my room. There was no muffle or distance with it. Right there beneath me, inches. I didn't move, I could hardly breathe. No more coughing or sounds after, and I felt completely crazy. As the years passed, the disturbances would fade, slowly. The helicopters stopped coming almost completely. The knocking softened and became true background noise. We only heard it every now and again, and Dad thinks it was just rocks shifting under the house. And to my brother and I, though, this place has never felt the same. The doors are still out there in the woods. We've checked. They haven't moved. They haven't rusted. They appear maintained. No overgrowth, no layers of dirt or dust along the seams. Whatever is beneath our house apparently comes and goes, or at least receives company of some kind. Whatever the case, though, it's become a lot more quiet now. Some nights when I can't sleep, I wonder if it was a Morse code of some kind, maybe just to scare us, or to warn us, or maybe someone was asking for help down there. Who knows? This happened in June near Asheville, North Carolina, along the Appalachian Trail. My boyfriend, our dog, and I had been kayaking all day and set up a camp near the river where the trail runs almost right alongside the water. Our campsite was maybe 10 feet off the AT civilization, if you can call it that. It was only about a 5-minute walk down the trail, a road crossing, a dumpster, a small boat ramp, close enough to feel safe, but far enough to still feel alone. It had been a long, stressful day on the river. Strong current, one rough spill, a near flip, so by late afternoon we were just trying to decompress. We'd run low on weed, so we ate some edibles and just stretched out. My boyfriend was half asleep in his hammock near the water. I was lying on the towel by the tent. The dog was wandering between us. And that's when this man just walked straight into our camp. He came up the trail wearing a full backpacking rig, big pack, sweat-darkened shirt, trekking poles, legit through hiker gear, you know? And then started talking before he'd even reached us. "Hey, y'all mind taking my trash?" It took me a second to process, then I realized, okay, trail etiquette. Some hikers will hand off their trash if they're passing a place with disposal. I guess that is normal. But we were 5 minutes from a dumpster. I told him that. There's a bin right down the trail. You can just toss it there. Instead, he pulls this large bag of weed out from his pack. "You can have some of this if you take it." That threw me off. Still, I guess free weed is free weed, right? I said sure. He dropped a small handful of nugs into my palm and stuffed his trash into our bag. I asked the usual questions. "You through hiking? How long you been out?" He said he'd been on the trail for a couple of months now. Then he asked if he could hang out and have a beer. And in hindsight, that was the first mistake. At the time, he just seemed like a lonely guy who hadn't talked to anybody in a while. And honestly, I thought he might have assumed that I was alone, but my boyfriend was still in the hammock, half hidden. When my boyfriend eventually lifted his head, the guy was visibly startled, and that confirmed it. He hadn't realized that I wasn't by myself. He kept saying things like, don't worry, I'm not one of those creepy people," which is exactly what creepy people say. Still, I guess the conversation was normal enough. Trail stories, blisters, rain in Virginia, the usual. We decided to smoke using a gravity setup in the river and offered him some since he'd given us the weed. He took a hit, coughed hard, almost like he'd never smoked or something. And that's when everything kind of shifted. He started talking and talking and talking, but it was barely audible, just this low muttering stream of words aimed at the river itself. We couldn't make out all the sentences, just kind of fragments of it. He'd stare at the water while speaking, then suddenly look at us like we were supposed to respond. We'd nod back and laugh awkwardly. Yeah, man, totally. But we had no idea what he was saying. Time stretched, he drank 3 beers, smoked 2 cigarettes, and he didn't leave. At one point, when we stopped trying to engage, he pulls out his phone and starts talking to Siri, then yelling at Siri, calling it a bitch, demanding answers. The river was loud but steady. The trees were still, no wind. Then, out of nowhere, he turns toward us and asks, "On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do I seem like a serial killer to you?" When he said it, it wasn't playful, nor like a joke. It was direct, curious, even serious. My boyfriend and I locked eyes instantly. That silent exchange, like, we're both hearing this, right? We forced out nervous laughter. 1. Definitely a 1. He stared at us for a beat too long, then nodded slowly, a little smile teasing at his lips. After that, we shut it down. We climbed into the hammock together, started talking to each other instead of him. Close circle, body language clear. He said he was going to smoke one more cigarette and head out, and I'm telling you now, that was the longest cigarette I've ever seen anybody smoke. I watched it burn down millimeter by millimeter as dusk crept in. He took these long drags, stared at the river, looked over at us occasionally, zero smile or emotion on his face. Finally, he stood up, shouldered his back, walked back up the trail the way he came. But it was nearly dark, which meant he couldn't be going far. The Appalachian Trail is different at night. Sound carries strangely, footsteps are amplified. You hear movement long before you actually see it. That night we were certain he would come back. Every snapping twig would jolt us upright. Multiple people walked past us on the trail after dark, headlamps bobbing. But they were hikers that we'd seen earlier that day. A strange couple who thought they might live on the trail, but not him. Still, we planned for disaster. If he came back, we'd grab the dog and run straight into the river, let the current take us downstream to the boat ramp. Which sounds insane, I know, especially when we whispered it, but at least it was a plan. We didn't sleep much, which was fine because he never returned, and we didn't see him again. Maybe he was just this socially awkward guy. Maybe he'd been alone in the woods for far too long, forgot how to normally interact. Maybe he just got a little too high. Or maybe he approached what he thought was a lone woman at a riverside camp. Maybe he tested the air, stayed longer than necessary, asked a question that he'd been thinking about for quite a while now. The memory doesn't scare me. It's what could have happened out there in the middle of nowhere, smothered in darkness. In May of 2014, a crime in Waukesha, Wisconsin, became one of the most chilling examples of internet fiction bleeding off into reality. 3 12-year-old girls had become deeply immersed in online creepypasta culture, especially the fictional character of Slender Man. Born from the internet forums and amplified through YouTube, Reddit, and other various horror sites, Slender Man had become more than just a scary story to them. To these girls, he was real. In reality, Slender Man had been born on an image board, some say 4chan, in hopes of winning a contest for scariest picture. Slender Man was simply just a creepy Photoshop job of a man in a suit at a park, chasing kids around a playground with his infamously long arms. The rest of his mythos was simply a reaction to that original image. Like many others, they spent months reading lore, watching videos, sharing theories online. Over time, the line between fiction and belief eroded, though. They began to convince themselves that Slender Man existed as a real supernatural entity, and he was watching them, influencing them, calling them to his cause. According to police interviews, the girls believed they needed to commit a murder to become Slender Man's proxies and to prove their loyalty. They also believed that if they didn't comply, Slender Man would kill all of their families. Their only chance at survival was sacrificing one of their own and becoming pawns for this entity. They lured their friend into the woods under the guise of playing, then stabbed her 19 times and left her for dead. Miraculously, though, the victim would survive. The case would horrify the public, but it also became a landmark moment in online culture, showing how internet mythology, when mixed with youth, obsession, and isolation, could become real enough to inspire real-world violence, even murder. Just a few weeks after the Slender Man stabbing, another internet-fueled tragedy would unfold, this time rooted not in fictional lore, but in a toxic online identity. In June of 2014, Elliot Rodger carried out a mass killing in Isla Vista, California, murdering 6 people and injuring 14 others before taking his own life. Before the attack, Rodger left behind a manifesto and a series of YouTube videos that revealed how deeply he had been immersed in online incel, involuntary celibate, communities. These were spaces where anger, misogyny, and grievance were reinforced through constant online validation. On Reddit-adjacent forums and similar platforms, Rodger absorbed a worldview that framed women and society as enemies, and himself a victim of a rigged system. His writings echoed talking points and narratives common inside these online spaces: entitlement, resentment, and a belief that violence was actually justified. That perhaps violence was in fact the key to making all of this go away. Elliot believed that if he could showcase his fury, perhaps he could scare women into never telling a man no ever again. After the attack, his manifesto and videos were circulated, analyzed, and in some dark corners of the internet, even praised. Reddit threads would dissect his ideology in real time. Some condemned it, others archived it. In fringe spaces, he actually became a symbol. The chilling part really isn't what he did. It's how an online grievance culture gave him a script, a community, a framework that helped turn his resentment into death itself. Roger wasn't frequent on Reddit, but he posted his manifesto, serial killer style, videos almost everywhere, and many different communities analyzed them. Users on bodybuilding.com, where Elliot Rodger was a regular visitor, actually commented on Elliot's creepy serial killer-like qualities just a week before his actual rampage. Reddit, though, was the rabbit hole. You could find almost anything available on the kid, as well as multitudes of commentary and speculation. They pulled apart every post, every second of footage, and built a profile of Elliot that rivaled that of law enforcement. In the late 2010s, a disturbing online phenomenon began to circulate through Reddit, YouTube, and social media, the so-called Blue Whale Challenge. The story claimed that children were being contacted online by an anonymous curator who would assign them a series of escalating dares over several weeks. The tasks allegedly started small, waking up at odd hours, watching disturbing videos, and gradually escalating into self-harm, with the final challenge being suicide. Journalists and investigators later found little evidence of a centralized organized game. But here's the actual disturbing part. The panic itself was relentless. Schools, parents, politicians, the whole world was addressing this in real time. Reddit threads, warning posts, news segments, and a viral video spread the legend so wildly that kids began reenacting the behavior even without a real organizer. The kids became their own curators. Schools would issue alerts. Police departments released public warnings. Parents reported children carving symbols into their arms, mimicking what they'd seen online. In multiple cases, families directly linked suicide attempts and self-harm to exposure to the blue whale content. Now, whether the challenge existed as advertised almost didn't really matter. The kids had now taken over. The internet had created something far more dangerous, a viral horror narrative that kids believed was actually real. The fear, the dares, the mythology became a kind of digital urban legend that encouraged real-world harm through imitation and psychological pressure, even if they were just pretending. Following all of this, a new kind of internet-driven danger had become disturbingly common: viral challenge culture. Across Reddit, TikTok, YouTube, and other platforms, dangerous dares would spread like HPV inside an army barracks. What started off as jokes or shock content quickly would become trends, and then expectations. Kids were doing things we couldn't even imagine. Some of the most notorious included the Skullbreaker Challenge, where people would kick someone's legs out from underneath them mid-jump. The Benadryl Challenge, encouraging teens to take dangerous doses to hallucinate. The Blackout Challenge, which involved cutting off oxygen to induce passing out. The Fire Challenge, where participants set parts of their body on fire. Reddit threads are filled with warning posts, hospital stories, grieving family members trying to understand how something so obviously dangerous would become normalized. In multiple documented cases, teens would die or suffer permanent brain damage trying to complete any of these challenges. What makes this category so disturbing isn't really just the recklessness, it's the psychology. Online dangerous behavior is rewarded with views, likes, and attention. Algorithms push extreme content. Peer pressure is amplified by visibility. What would have been dismissed as a stupid idea becomes a trend, and then a rite of passage. It becomes addicting when those views hit. It's the same pattern as the earlier cases. The internet doesn't just suggest behavior, it normalizes it, it gamifies it, it dares people to bring it into the real world. I suffer from autism, social anxiety, PTSD, and severe anger issues. At school, I'm usually mocked by other people for being the weird white kid. I get called a school shooter a lot because I had a really unhealthy obsession with the Columbine massacre. People laughed when they said it, like it was a joke, like it couldn't possibly land them anywhere dangerous. Teachers overheard it sometimes and didn't even intervene. After a while, I stopped correcting anybody. When you hear something enough, it starts to feel assigned to you, like a role in a family. It was just the space that I seemed to be filling. I was 16 at the time, living in a small country with strict firearm laws, but access still existed. I was already unraveling. My best friend, the person who used to pull me back when my thoughts got extremely violent, started to ghost me, only reaching out when he needed money or some kind of favor. My ex-girlfriend had just broken up with me, and my social anxiety had hardened into something like a callus inside my mind. I wasn't just sad anymore. I was bitter. I was humiliated. I felt like everybody around me had a script for life, and I was improvising. Anything that went well for a peer or a neighbor would infuriate me. I wanted to set fire to anything positive, anything successful. I got dumped the night before because she liked another guy, a guy I knew pretty well. The details sound small when I write it all out, but at the time, it felt like proof that I was in fact replaceable. How else could I feel? That morning at school on August 25th, 2018, everything felt hostile. The hallways were suffocating. Every laugh felt directed. Kids were picking on me, threatening me, laughing at me. And I remember thinking how inescapable this all was. Like this was just what my life was now, forever and ever. I carried a journal everywhere with me. It was messy, angry, mostly incoherent babblings on violence. Writing was the only way I could slow down my thoughts. But on this day, the writing didn't slow down anything, it actually accelerated it. I felt this overwhelming surge of rage mixed with suicidal thoughts, like two currents feeding into one another. I started writing about hurting the school, not dramatically, not emotionally, just line after line, detached, almost clinical. That's what scares me now. There was no panic, no adrenaline, just a sense of momentum. Everything felt natural and fine in the moment. I walked out of class in the hallway. I passed a friend and told him, "Dude, go home." He asked me why, and I told him that I'm gonna do something. You should get the fuck out of here. I still replay that moment over and over, how casually it came out of my mouth, like I was warning somebody about bad weather before a storm would roll in. And I guess I was the storm, a black cloud of hatred that was about to punish everything around me. I messaged my ex, told her to forget about me. She knew I'd had these thoughts since I was young. She panicked immediately, called me over and over, trying to ground me in the moment, telling me to breathe, asking where I was. I was almost outside when everything collapsed on me. I saw it all at once. The permanence, the headlines, the families, the fact that I wouldn't be just ending my life, but poisoning other people's forever. I called the mental health clinic, asked for my psychologist, told them everything about what was almost about to happen. Saying it out loud shattered that illusion that I was in control, and soon I was weeping, hyperventilating, on the edge of delirium. It was hands down the most terrifying experience of my life, not because of the chaos, but because I learned how thin the line really was, how easy it was to drift towards something irreversible without realizing you crossed a point of no return. I was committed fully to ending any and everybody that had ever caused me grief. There was nothing that would stop me inside my mind. I'm actually in a healthy relationship now. I cut my old best friend out of my life, let him know the damage that he caused me, which was very relieving. I'm still on good terms with my ex. Therapy forced me to confront things that I buried, bullying, resentment, the way anger had become a buffer between me and reality. I even transferred to a school for students with mental health issues for a while, just to slow everything down and reset. The country I live in now is very considerate when it comes to mental health services. I've told a few close friends. I've told my mom and my older brother. And every time I say it, it feels unreal now, like I'm talking about somebody else. But it wasn't somebody else. It was me. It was me that almost murdered students in every classroom. Me that nearly secured a firearm and pumped round after round into innocent casualty. I can hardly stomach the thought now. Update. I didn't make this Reddit post for praise. I expect judgment. I'm posting it because this almost destroyed everything, and because it didn't have to. I got help. I'm still getting help. My anxiety is lower. My anger isn't consuming me any longer. I haven't had serious thoughts like that since. If you're hearing this and you recognize yourself in any part of it, there is another way. Please reach out for help before a moment becomes a legacy that you can't escape. When I was 12, I learned something about the local woodland. My best friend Alex's father had bought this huge stretch of forest about an hour outside of Montreal. It had been nothing but trees when they acquired it. They cleared a small patch for a house and left the rest untouched. A dirt road cut through the property, running for several kilometers before reaching a few scattered homes that were further up. The road divided into two completely different worlds. On the right side, the side with the house, the forest was open, golden, rolling hills, deciduous trees that let sunlight spill through them. It felt breathable, friendly, safe enough for kids to wander, dogs without a leash. It felt like home. On the left side, there was a ditch about 2 meters deep running parallel to the road. The ditch was strange, filled with rusted car parts, wheels, doors, steering columns, moss covered and half buried like relics from some mechanical graveyard. Beyond the ditch rose this steep hill, thick with dark conifers. The trunks were nearly black, the canopy swallowed all of the light. And at the top of that hill was a swamp ground. We called it Demon Forest. And it's not a joke, not really. We all felt it, a pressure change, a subtle animal instinct that said, don't go up there, don't stay long if you do, leave, go back to the road. We rarely climbed up that hill. One autumn afternoon in 2001 or 2002, my family was visiting Alex's. We got bored listening to adults talk and decided to walk the dirt road. Alex's father warned us before we left. Something had been getting into their trash. He thought it was a large dog that belonged to somebody further up the road. He said it looked horrific, diseased, patches of fur were missing, not healthy. If we saw it, don't approach it. It was overcast but calm. The air was still in that heavy pre-winter way. Fallen leaves carpeted everything in gold and red. We walked uphill with the bright forest to our right and the demon forest to our left, shoes crunching with every single step. That uneasy feeling crept in further as we climbed, and about halfway up the slope, I saw something that stopped me. A large pine branch extended over the road from the dark hillside, and tied to it was this pink ribbon. Now, that alone did not make sense. Nobody else lived directly on that land, and there were no little girls. No reason for something delicate and bright to be hanging from a tree deep inside a private forest. What made it worse was that ribbon was whipping violently in the air. It flapped almost horizontal, and there was no wind. The trees were still. The leaves on the ground weren't moving. My hair wasn't moving. I licked my finger and held it up the way my dad had taught me to. Got nothing. But that ribbon snapped and fluttered as it caught steady in a gust. I reached up and touched it. It moved strangely against my fingers, and for some reason, I couldn't even speak. I wanted to talk about it, ask about it, but the words wouldn't come to me. Alex, on the other hand, didn't seem to care. He was distracted, scanning the hill. I didn't push it, and we just kept walking. Eventually, the steep hill softened into a clearing, a half-circle slope carved away from the trees. It felt theatrical, as if we stood on a stage and the forest above us was an audience, looking down on what we might do. The ground between us and the tree line was open, covered only in fallen leaves, no brush, no shrubs, clear visibility all the way to the top. Alex froze next to me. "Did you hear that?" he asked. I hadn't. He said there were wildcats in the forest. His dad had seen them. One had kittens. He was suddenly thrilled by that idea, and he insisted we heard a meow from up there. I told him again that I didn't hear anything, but before I could stop him, he cupped his hands, meowing loudly toward the trees. The forest answered him back. A clear, deliberate meow, not an echo. It wasn't distorted, clear as daylight. Alex lit up immediately and did it again. And again, the woods responded back to him. Every time he meowed, something above us would meow back. Exactly once in response, every time, a perfect mirror. Even at 12 years old, I knew animals don't behave like that. Wildcats don't conduct conversations with children, and there was no echo in that space. The leaves and soil would have swallowed it, and yet there it was, this touch of feedback, a distortion, and it continued to answer. Then out of nowhere, the leaves up the hill began to rustle. Something was moving toward us. The sound was heavy, whatever it was huge, heavy, two-legged, crunching through the leaves without any kind of hesitation, without any care for being heard. And yet, there was nothing there. We could see the entire slope between us and that tree line. Nothing was moving. Nothing broke the surface of leaves, no shape, no shadow, but the rustling multiplied. Alex grinned over at me. "The kittens are coming. It sounds like a whole litter." My eyes went wide and shaky. I felt like Alex wasn't Alex anymore. What he was saying, there just wasn't any logic to it. There's now several distinct sets of movements, closing in, fanning out. Still nothing visible. Alex continued to smile, clasping his hands together in anticipation. Panic began to start in my stomach though and climbed up into my throat. The clearing felt exposed. We were out in the open, no quick exit, standing in an open space with invisible movement surrounding us. I heard it then, loud, wet panting, right at my feet. For a split second, my brain tried to normalize it. I had a husky at home. I knew that sound. But then reality slammed back in me. There was no dog there, yet the panting was inches from my leg. I looked down. Nothing. But my brain understood there should be something in my field of vision, right? In that moment, my entire consciousness fizzled and popped. I short-circuited. The panting continued, heavy, close, as if a large dog stood pressed up against my shins. I spun in a full circle, screaming, but there was nothing. No animal, no movement, no shadows. The clearing was completely empty. Yet the panting did not stop. I looked up the road. About 100 meters away, at the crest of the hill, stood this lone dog. Large, broad-headed. Something like a Rottweiler, but zombified. Fur was patchy, missing in spots. Skin was visible, but dirty, unkempt. Open, festering wounds here and there. And was staring right at us. There's no possible way I could hear that dog breathing from that distance, though. But the panting at my feet was unmistakable. That was the moment that instinct kind of just took over. I ran, faster than I ever had before in my life, and Alex was beside me. We didn't look back. We tore down the hill until the house came back into view. We never walked that road again. We told his dad that we saw the dog, and he went and paraded around with a rifle for a bit, but didn't see any sign of it. We called it a day and spent the rest of it inside. Years later, I still went to Alex's house. We partied there as teenagers, drank too much, smoked too much, stayed up late. But stepping outside at night just always felt spooky still. The forest was aware of us. When I slept over, I sometimes woke up in that half-conscious state, feeling something in the room. Once I swore that I saw something near the ceiling, a shape that wasn't a shape, just pooled up like a liquid darkness. We never talked about that day either, not once. As an adult, I looked into the history of the land. It sits on a territory traditionally inhabited by Algonquin peoples, possibly Mohawk depending on the boundary lines. The knowledge doesn't really explain what happened though, the ribbon, the mimicry, the energy, but I do know this. Something in that forest responded when we called, and whatever draws breath out there apparently doesn't need a body to do it.
This happened to me Wednesday night. So my boyfriend lives in the town over and he orders me lifts back and forth to go and see him. We've been doing this for over the past 7 months without any problems. But we spent the day together and had an amazing time as always, and he ordered me a lift back home. The guy pulls up and my boyfriend puts me in the car and gives me a passionate kiss goodbye. The driver is from Cuba, hardly speaks a lick of English and is using Google Translate the entire time to talk to me. First, it started off as, "Do you mind sitting in the front seat? I don't like for people to sit behind me." Okay, no problem. However, instead of letting me out of the car, he asks me to climb over the seat, which made me feel a bit uncomfortable, and then I realized that he was staring at me the whole time that I'm doing so. Then he proceeds to tell me, "I hope I'm not being too daring, but you're very beautiful." Okay, cool, I get this compliment all the time, so I say thank you, but I'm a bit put off by this, to be honest. He goes on like a regular driver, asking me if the music was okay, and the volume and all that, you know, the regular stuff. Then he starts asking me about the address that I'm going to. "Am I taking you to your home?" I reply, "Yes, I'm going home." He then asks, "Can I go home with you?" I laugh at this and say no. He asks about the guy that put me in the car, if he was my boyfriend or my husband. He's my boyfriend, my soon-to-be husband. He asks, "Can I be your boyfriend too?" I say absolutely not. He asks why not. I say that I'm totally against that I'm in love with my boyfriend very much and that I'm extremely loyal and faithful to him. He says he doesn't have to know. In Cuba, we believe in having multiple partners, and not all of them know about each other. And I say, well, that's definitely not a thing for me. I don't believe in that one bit. He says, your boyfriend makes the mistake of sending you home alone. I would have taken you myself to make sure you got there safe. I'm getting very upset at this point, and I'm only laughing at what he says, trying to maintain a friendly composure because I know how ugly things could turn if I start giving this guy attitude. He doesn't speak again for a while, and when he does, he asks me again if he could come home with me. I tell him no again, and he says, you're so beautiful, I really want to be your other boyfriend. I don't even say anything but shake my head no and start fidgeting with my phone. He tells me that he has a lot of money and that he would take care of me. I told him that I didn't care about that and that I wasn't interested. He asks if he could give me his number so that we could text each other, and I say no. After what seemed like an eternity, we pull up to my house and he gets down trying to help me with my bags. I decline his help and he tells me, hold on, and pulls out his phone one more time and asks, can I come inside with you? I tell him have a good night and to have a safe trip back, and dart inside as fast as I could, locking all the doors behind me, calling my boyfriend immediately so that he could report this weirdo because I don't want this unpleasant experience to happen to anybody else. In the end, though, the only thing Lyft did was give my boyfriend a $5 credit to his account for the unpleasant experience. He wasn't even able to tell him. He really wasn't even able to tell them why it was so unpleasant. And look, I know, stories like this aren't actually the scariest or creepiest ones out there, but if you were a young woman and in a stranger's car like this, and they were pressing like this and trying to come into your home and everything, trust me, going through something like this is actually pretty terrifying. So yes, ladies, creepy drivers are definitely a thing, and please, be careful out there. So I'm a man living alone in an apartment, for reference. I was walking into my building this evening and a lady that I've never talked to before and rarely even seen said hello. I'm personable and polite, so I said hello back and went to walk into the building. Then she asked how I was and how the weekend was going. I assumed it was just some friendly small talk, so I obliged, and then immediately she asked where I worked and how long I've lived in the building for, which threw me a little bit but seemed innocent enough. Then, about as soon as I finished answering, she said, no one has ever helped me or offered me help my whole life, and I'm just trying to better myself, but nobody will help. People don't ask me to go out and do any fun things, and I like to do fun things. So I just kind of stammered something about how that's rough or whatever. Again, immediately once I stopped talking, she started up the same thread, a bit frustrated and exasperated. I don't have any friends. No one offers help. I'm just a nice person. I'm paraphrasing, but that was basically it. This whole time she's like barely blinking though, won't break eye contact and is kind of cornering me as well. My hair on the back of my neck is up and my skin is crawling, and my super came out and said that she needed me for something and got me inside. She then told me that I really shouldn't be talking to her. I said that I thought maybe she was just lonely and socially inept, but she said to avoid her. Women like this seem to have a good instinct about dangerous or unhinged people, so I plan on following her advice, but as someone with friends on the spectrum and having worked with the mentally disabled in my life, I at first thought that maybe it was just that. Now, it's been a few hours and honestly, I still cannot shake this uneasy feeling. I thought that I would ask anybody here if they knew what this might be, or maybe if this is ringing any bells or setting alarms off for anyone. Because I don't want to treat someone who is just eccentric as a pariah, undeservedly too. But honestly though, I would be lying if I didn't say that my gut is screaming for me to be careful. Over a year ago, I was forced to move out of my apartment due to a serious mold problem that was making people sick, and the management refused to remediate it to the extent that we needed them to, and they did as little as legally possible, basically. But because of all of my things that were there essentially were caked in toxic mold spores, it was a huge effort to thoroughly clean what could be cleaned and bring the rest to the dump. We didn't thrift them because, well, the contamination was either too difficult or just not possible to clean certain items, like couches and mattresses and things like that. But anyway, my sister-in-law was helping me sort through everything that I owned to determine what was worth keeping and cleaning. I lost most of my belongings at this stage, but while we worked, she kept saying that she felt uncomfortable in certain rooms and couldn't shake the feeling. I didn't think too much of it. We were alone at night, and I suggested that we move out to the brightly lit porch instead. Every now and then she would turn back inside to grab a box or a tool or whatever, and then she said that she saw some shadow figures. She said that she didn't say anything earlier because it might have been her imagination, but now apparently she was sure. Well, we had done a lot of work, so we decided to just wrap things up and leave in the end. Now, on the way back to the car, she glanced back at the unit and she froze. She then says, "Look in the windows. You don't see that?" I didn't see anything out of the ordinary at first. She then held firmly onto my arm while trembling slightly and said, "How do you not see that? It's right there." She was apparently seeing a shadow figure, clear as day, looking right at us. Now, I may not have seen anything or felt anything, but just the fact that she was just standing behind me, gripping my arm harder and harder, and now had tears in her eyes. This woman is no actor. She was genuinely terrified. So now I was a little bit spooked myself. We got into the car and we left, and she said that the thing followed us with its face. I don't think that she could see discernible eyes, though, as we drove past it. We said some prayers to St. Michael and others, and really, that was about it. Now, could it have just been the mold problem? Maybe, but as far as I know, the mold in there, it really shouldn't have caused anything like that. Could she have just been seeing things? Possibly, but why the reaction like that? To this day, I'm really not sure what happened, but all I know is that it was a bit of a scary experience, and to be honest, I was glad that I was leaving. For a little bit of context, this happened last year around February. I am 17 and I'm a female. So, it was a random day. I had just finished school and I was home. I've always been very scared when I'm home alone, but it's not like all the time, but sometimes it just gets to me, and I feel very bad and a bit paranoid, really. I'm just going to describe to you as well how my hallway is made, so that you can understand the context to this story. So at the beginning of the hallway, there's my bedroom on the left, and after that, there's my parents' bedroom, still on the left, and at the end there's the bathroom that is the toilet too. The door to the bathroom is weird though, because there's sort of a curved window in it, so if I'm inside the bathroom I can see movements, and vice versa. If I'm outside, I can also see movements from inside the bathroom, but it's not very clear. Anyway, so I was in my room and I decided to go to the toilet that was in the bathroom, and when I was in it, I didn't close the door or anything because, like I said, I was home alone. And then I heard a sound coming from my parents' room. Like the floor was creaking and somebody was walking towards me. Of course, I locked the door right away. And so, I had 10% on my phone and all that in all the horror movies. Quite honestly, I have zero survival skills and I didn't think that it was that serious, so I called a friend on FaceTime and told her everything, but really I was scared, but sort of still laughing. It's what I do when I get terrified. So I decided to approach the said curved window that I mentioned earlier, and that was when I saw a man. I started to scream like I'm calling the police and leave and stuff like this. I didn't have a lot of battery on my phone, but I decided at this point to call my dad, who quickly rushed home. But still, at this point I had no battery and I just had to pray for my dad to get home quickly. I was scared, and I imagined that when my dad was going to open the front door that the man was going to jump on him or something like that. After about 45 minutes, where I was just sitting in the bathroom on the toilet, but holding the door in case the man tried to push it open, my dad finally arrived. And trust me, I heard the floor creak again. And then my dad told me that I could come out and that there was really nothing there. In fact, there were no windows open or anything. I was really confused by that, and I think about this whole thing often. Like, did I imagine everything, or did something really happen? Just so you know as well, I'm really not into the supernatural stuff or explanations, so my theory is that somebody actually broke into the house at some point. I happened to come home at around that moment. They hid, they were somewhere around the house, and they got out before my dad got home. Really, that's the only logical explanation for it. Still though, whether paranormal or not, that is a terrifying thought. About 6 or 7 years ago, a friend and I were on our way to visit another friend of ours who had moved to a small town for a teaching job in a state high school. All of us grew up in the same seaside state capital, and the small town in question is about 120 kilometers of bad road, curvy and slippery, but through it is a very scenic route as it goes through hills and also a natural reserve. Now, I cannot remember much of the tree trip per se, but really it doesn't matter too much. I was driving and we hopped onto the highway that goes inland. Rain was pouring down and we were listening to Black Flag whilst talking about music when I stopped at a gas station because the gas was getting low, and this friend and I, well, we're kind of charmers, so we start some small talk with the cashier and I mention that we're going somewhere. The cashier then mentions a shortcut through a dirt road instead of the usual highway, citing that it would cut 30 minutes short off the trip, but that it wasn't really that safe given the weather conditions. I emphasized that it was raining hard, but we were both idiots and, at the time, drunk idiots as well, so we kept an eye on the entrance and took the shortcut. It was a rocky road that cut through the Atlantic forest, probably illegal since it also cut through a national park. Due to the heavy rain, as you can imagine, it was especially rocky and muddy, so I had to keep a steady speed of about 5 to 10 kilometers per hour, in a Ford KA 2015, mind you. There was not a single light in sight as well. Not a house, not a street light, only the car headlights showing nothing but water pouring down, and a disgustingly horrible road ahead. We were joking about how the rain stopped, and my friend said that he wanted to take that chance to take a bit of a leak, so I just stopped in the middle of the road and I told him to hurry up. He then covers his shoes with a pair of plastic bags from the beers that we bought and goes to the front of the car. I honk a few times just for the heck of it to take a few laughs of the situation, and he moves a little bit forward where the headlight sort of doesn't hit him anymore. And it took the time to light a cigarette to hear him kind of exclaim, sort of yell in fright, I guess, like when you're taken by surprise by something. And the guy ran back to the car, slipping and falling on the ground and messing up all of my passenger seat with his muddy pants and slamming the door. He then looks at me and says that he saw what he believed was a mountain lion or something like that, and that I should slam the gas and get the heck out of here. Obviously, I couldn't do that because of the conditions. Also, it would mess up my car's suspension. Instead, I turn off the music, we wait a little bit, and nothing happens. But after about 20 seconds, we both see a huge, and I mean absolutely massive figure move between the trees. It was at least 2 meters tall or so, and we couldn't really see much of it, only black fur and the eyes that reflected the car's headlights. But as fast as we saw it, the thing went left and back into the woods. I think that I speak for both of us when I say that we were absolutely frozen and ecstatic all at the same time. To this day, I still don't know how I could remain calm enough to start the car and slowly drive away to our friend's place. We told him about it, and he said that it was probably a mountain lion still, but I don't know. Mountain lions aren't typically 2 meters tall. They may be horizontally that long, but not tall. And I swear that I could hear its footsteps as it ran away as well, despite the windows being closed, so whatever it was also extremely heavy. Anyway, I just wanted to share this in case anybody out there might know what the heck we saw that night. And about a year back, I was standing in my balcony around 3 a.m. at night, smoking a cigarette. I was facing the window, and in the window I saw a reflection of something sitting on the rooftop of the building opposite across the street. I turned around and there was nothing. I continued smoking, and as I look up at the roof again, I saw a dark figure sitting on the ledge of the building. It wasn't sitting normal too, kind of like how Spider-Man sits on a light pole, like it was hunting for something. I kept looking at it, trying to figure out what it was and if it's really what I think it is, or am I just sleep deprived or something. After like half a minute of me staring though, I felt like it looked back at me, and I just kept staring at it, and I was completely lost. It was a little bit dark, but I'm certain that this thing had almost human-like features, but in the most messed up way imaginable. A skin that kind of looked burnt, and I'm sure that it didn't have eyeballs and just 2 empty eye sockets. When I realized what I was doing, I immediately turned my head down. Just a second later, I looked up again, and it was gone. I went inside and drank some water, and I then hear a scream coming from somewhere nearby. I went to my balcony again, and the screaming didn't stop. It sounded like a woman, but there were no breaks in the scream. It was a continuous loud scream. Me being a bit of an idiot, I went downstairs and started walking towards the sound. The road was dimly lit and not a soul in sight. I walked, and I think about maybe 500 meters in, I realized suddenly that the sound was exactly like it was from my balcony. The sound should have been louder, much louder, but it was exactly the same. So I kept walking towards the sound, and I walked for a while and still didn't get any louder. Every once in a while I would forget that I was walking, or even where, and just kept walking, and then I would sort of snap back as well. It was a really strange feeling, and at this point I realized that I had come quite far from my house to an almost barren area. So I started walking back towards my house, and the screaming didn't stop. It was an extremely eerie sound, almost human but not quite. A human's breath while screaming, but whatever it was, it didn't sound right. It's almost like I was drawn towards it too. Anyway, I eventually reached home and opened a can of beer, and after a while I went to sleep. I woke up the next morning and went to that rooftop to see if I could find anything. I first inspected the spot that I first saw in the reflection, and then the ledge, and there was nothing. I used baby powder as well. Don't judge, I know, kind of cringe. And a transparent tape too, to see if I could find a fingerprint or find any cells in the sample, but in the end I found nothing. Now, here's the thing though. I don't really believe in ghosts or the paranormal, like, at all. I honestly still don't because, well, I'm just a scientist at heart. But I cannot for the life of me find an explanation for this incident. It never haunts me. I didn't lose any sleep over it or anything, but I still wonder what it could have been. I know I wasn't seeing things. I mean, I wasn't drunk or high or anything. I guess the reason that I'm sharing this story after a year is because, well, 3 days ago, I was sitting with my friends and we were sharing weird things that we haven't told anyone about, and I shared this incident with them and they were pretty terrified by it, especially because they know that I'm the kind of guy who laughs at someone who claims that they saw a ghost or even someone who believes in one. A friend told me that she didn't sleep the night after going home and recommended that I share it here to ask people what they think it was. So, what do you think that it was? I'm sharing this because I found this place tonight and I thought that I would share something that I've experienced probably around 2005 to 2006 when I was about 10 to 11 years old. I've never told anyone about this and I always felt the need to though. It's just one of those things that I'll always remember, I guess. So, when I was a kid, we used to go on these monthly vacations in August to a beach town here in Portugal called Sesimbra. It was always very fun, going to the beach every day, playing football with my cousins, going out for dinner to eat seafood. Honestly, it was a really great time to be Portuguese and travel in your own country. Anyways, this old lady would arrange us beachfront apartments every year, and it would vary, some worse, some better. There's this huge building at the end of California Beach, though, which seems to be falling off the edge, and there's these sort of wooden stairs that you need to climb to directly access the building from the beach. If you've been there, then you'll know what I'm talking about, but we were spending the monthly vacation on this building specifically, on one of the top floors. I believe it was the 8th floor, and I used to sleep in the living room couch, which had access to the balcony. I cannot remember sleeping alone on a regular basis, mainly because I was really scared of the dark and being alone at that age. Usually my dad would sleep there as well, while my grandparents stayed in the only bedroom. However, I can't remember why he wasn't there this particular night, but since he worked a full-time job, he would often stay only for 2 weeks instead of the whole month, so it's probably why, I would guess, but anyway, all of that is to say that I was sleeping when I woke up, startled, and I couldn't move. I was conscious, and I don't think it was sleep paralysis or anything like that. I was just terrified because of what I was hearing and seeing. It was a loud buzzing sound and a sort of light blue light covering the whole living room. I swear to you as well that I was so scared that I just couldn't face it, because I felt like this presence, or whatever it was, wasn't good. I don't think it was evil or demonic or whatever, but just terrifying and sort of threatening. It seemed to be some kind of a UFO just hovering near the balcony. I promised myself not to move until it was gone, and then the weirdest thing is that I cannot remember if I fell asleep again or if I simply waited for it to go away, but the next thing that I remember is that it was morning. What I do remember, though, is thinking to myself, this isn't a dream, this is real, and I won't forget that this is really happening. So obviously I remember that part, but as for that time gap, I have no idea what happened. Anyway, this felt good to get it off my chest after so many years and finally voice it and tell some other people. If you have any input or if you would like to share any thoughts, then please do.
I've been a mall security guard for about 4 years when I first met a dude called Craig. Guarding was something that I fell into around 2009 when the job market went and pooped its pants. The pay was okay, I didn't mind working nights, and some of the store clerks used to work us into their 20% employee discount, which was awesome. All my coworkers were pretty laid back too, including the boss. They were just regular guys bringing home a paycheck who didn't go looking for any trouble. But then Craig got hired, and right away, we all knew that he was different. Craig was a short, balding dude with glasses who was either at the end of his 30s or the beginning of his 40s. And word had it that he'd been a security guard ever since he dropped out of high school, and that meant for a while. but you'd never have guessed it from just looking at the guy. He was shy, quiet, and didn't strike me as someone who could handle himself if things got physical. But our boss said that he'd gotten amazing reviews from his references and hadn't taken a sick day in almost 6 years straight. Now, I guess you can't train that kind of a reliability into someone, and you gotta snatch it up where you can find it. So Craig got the job, and it wasn't long before I was working shifts with him. Now, including those in the parking lot, the mall had like 20-something security cameras, meaning a lot of our job was spent sitting in front of a giant bank of screens while watching for shoplifters and car thieves. In the daytime, we were the eyes in the sky and definitely much more of a reactive force than a proactive one. Night shifts were a different story altogether, but I'll get to that later. So one day, me and Craig are sitting in front of the screens. We can access each individual camera feed from the monitor on our computers, which we use to clip and store footage should we need to. But for the most part, we don't do that unless we've got a good reason to. So when I noticed how Craig was watching this one store without a break, I got kind of curious. When I noticed that he was watching the store that sold clothes and toys for the under fives, I asked if he'd spotted something suspicious. Now, it's kind of sad, but that store was one of the biggest shoplifting spots in the whole mall. I guess the junkies figured out that formula and baby clothes sold fast over at the Hundreds block, so it became a real problem after a while. But then when I asked him, Craig switched over to the camera feed of another store and sort of said something like, "Oh, never mind. It was nothing." Now, I didn't pay it much mind at the time. I did the same thing myself from time to time, but then that same shift, about an hour before clock-out time, I caught him doing it again, and that time he just straight up denied it. Now, I said something like, "Watching the baby store again, huh?" And then he just sort of flicked over to another store again saying, "What? No." Now, I somehow got into my head that he had some crush on the girl who worked there, and in all fairness, she was cute, so it did track. I also thought that I had a little theory confirmed when I teased him with the prospect, and he turned as red as a stop sign. Now, I said, "You are into her, aren't you? You gonna ask her out? Come on, do it, dude. Don't be a wuss." He didn't get mad or anything. He just told me to stop while trying to keep a grin off his face. I left him alone, but not enough being like, turns out you're human after all. You're alright, kid." I clocked out maybe an hour or two later, and Craig grinned as I said, "Hey, don't let anyone else catch you crushing on the baby store girl again. They'll think you're stalking her." Over the next month or so, I was on a sort of string of night shifts watching the mall overnight, and 2 of those shifts were spent with Craig. I didn't see him as creepy robot anymore, just a quiet guy who focused on what was in front of him. But I did give him hell about not asking the baby store girl out yet. I told him to live a little, because the worst she could say is no. It's not even like he had to go anywhere near the store during daylight hours either, not unless it was an emergency. But still, all he did was grin and tell me to just buzz off. Now, night shifts were different to days in that we actively patrolled the mall complex once every half hour. Now, one guy would leave the office and take a walk around, while the other stayed behind to watch his back from the screen bank. We wouldn't always keep our eyes glued to the screens, not unless the walker called on the radio. So as Craig was walking around the mall from the 2:30 a.m. patrol, I wasn't paying attention to what he was doing. And not until I happened to look up and see that one of the store's shutters had been partially opened. Now, right away, I radioed over to Craig saying, "Dude, one of the stores is unlocked." And then I had this weird sort of like twin moment of realization as 2 thoughts hit me at once. Craig wasn't answering his radio, and the store that was open was the baby clothes store. Now, right away, I'm thinking, uh-oh, Craig's in the baby store, mainly because we were not allowed to just walk into the stores after closing time, not unless something serious is going down. And since Craig was so reliable, I figured that there's no way that he'd be risking his job like that unless there was something wrong. So I grabbed my keys, and off I went to the baby clothes store. Now, a few minutes later, I'm ducking under the half-raised shutter, yelling out, "Craig, you in here, buddy?" And immediately he responds, "Yeah, I'm here." and steps out from behind one of the displays. He almost scared the crap out of me, and then I asked what the hell he was doing, and he told me he thought he heard something from inside the store. Now I say, "Dude, why didn't you hit me up on the radio? That's why I'm here." As in, why I was sitting at the screen bank. Now he hears something, he calls it in, and I can see past the shutters and into the store with nothing but a swivel on my chair. So as soon as he said it, I knew his excuse was nonsense, and I reminded him of what he was doing might actually get his butt fired. And it was like dealing with some dumb newbie. Only Craig was not some dumb newbie. He knew the job, and he was pretty good at it, so it made exactly zero sense to me why he was acting the way he was. And so the next night, Craig kind of thanks me for, I don't know, caring about him, I guess. And he thanked me for not telling on him, and he also thanked me for getting him out of that store, which was weird because it was almost like the way an alcoholic might thank you for stopping him from drinking. And I guess that didn't ring the alarm bells that it should have, because at the time I just wanted to know what he was doing in the baby store so late. And that's when he broke eye contact and said something sort of like, I'm gonna be a father. And then right as I'm about to congratulate him, he added, and I'm scared. I told him something along the lines of, "It's okay to be scared, but I'm sure you'll be fine." But I didn't mean it. Not because I'm the kind to offer empty platitudes, but because I didn't believe him. I'm not saying that I have a particularly advanced bullcrap detector or anything like that. I just don't care how quiet a guy is. If his wife or girlfriend is pregnant, he complains to his buddies at work about it. Even if Craig wasn't the type to complain about it, I didn't buy him not bringing it up before that moment when I confronted him about that store. And I didn't all the way confront him, as in like I didn't call him out on complaining that he was going to be a dad. I just knew that from then on that he was hiding something, or at least he was maybe hiding something. It was just enough to affect my opinion of him until I knew what that thing was, and when I found out, it was almost like a bomb going off. Craig acted nice and normal for the rest of the time we worked together. I didn't catch him staring at stores, and I didn't catch him in any stores after hours either. He was just Craig. Quiet, weird Craig who lied about having a pregnant baby mama because the next time I asked about it, he totally responded to me saying, "Huh? Oh, yeah, she's fine," when I asked about her. Now, I thought it was weird as hell to lie about something like that, and I hoped that the real reason wasn't like sinister or anything. But that, as it turned out, was nothing but wishful thinking. And on a day when I had to do night shift with Craig, a friend of mine sent a message to the Facebook group chat we shared. Now, the first notification read something like, "Chris sent a video," and then the rest were him sending things like, "Oh my god, LMAO, check out this loser freak." And he used to send tons of stuff like that to the group chat. Weird videos or memes and all that kind of stuff. And so sometimes they were really funny, and other times they made your skin crawl. In this case, the video was most definitely of the skin-crawling variety. When I opened it, all the camera showed was what looked like a kid's room. And then out of nowhere, a grown man dressed as a baby walked into the shot and then turned towards the camera. He was wearing one of those weird baby hats, the bonnets, and some makeup, and had this almost oversized pacifier in his mouth. So at first I didn't recognize him, but he had to take the pacifier out to speak, and when he did, I suddenly realized what I was looking at. It was Craig, the adult baby now babbling about mommy and having a full die-die, and then pretending to cry, saying, "Wah, wah, wah." I remember closing the video, and then just standing there in my kitchen for a second or two, just not really knowing what to do with myself. Obviously, one of the thoughts going through my head was, that's why Craig was in the goddamn baby store. He obviously couldn't wear any of the clothes there, but knowing why he was interested in them made my skin feel like it wanted to crawl off my bones. But then my other thoughts involved stuff like, was Craig dangerous? Was he some kind of PDF file whose thing was dressing up like a baby? I had no idea, and it's not like I wanted to dedicate any brain power to it either. It made me feel uneasy and very queasy thinking about Craig all dressed up like that, But it made me even queasier thinking that I had to spend 10 hours in a shopping mall with him, completely alone. I ended up calling my buddy Chris, the one who sent the video, to ask where he'd found it and how many people he'd sent it to. He said someone from his job sent it to him and that he'd sent it to just about everyone he knew, with obvious exceptions for family. Now that meant the video was going around town, so it wasn't going to be long until Craig got recognized for being the giant man baby in it. And while a heck of a lot of people were going to laugh their butts off at him, I knew that there would be people that thought he was a predator and would want to hurt him. But was he a predator? Or was he just some harmless weirdo? Now that was the real question, so that night while we were at work, I decided to just ask him about it. It was probably one of the most awkward and creepy exchanges of my entire life, and it took me like 3 hours to work up to it too. I wasn't scared of Craig, at least I wasn't physically intimidated by him, but if I confronted him on what was no doubt a deep, dark secret, what was to stop him from freaking out and pulling a knife on me or something? Even if he didn't and just straight up denied all knowledge, spending the rest of my shift with him was going to be awkward as hell, so it was definitely a period where I thought to myself, just mind your own business and let whatever happens happen. But I couldn't, and in the end, I asked him. The second I said, "Hey Craig, I saw this video today," he turned even redder than I had asked him if he had a crush. Now, I cut myself off after the day and just watched his reaction to sort of gauge it, and I swear to God, Craig started sweating right there in front of me. I told him I figured that he knew which video I was talking about, but he didn't move and he didn't say anything. He just sat in his chair, eyes locked on the screen bank, swearing and shaking like he was coming down with some fever. I guess I didn't really know where to go from there. He'd already admitted it silently, but it was an admission all the same. And I don't think I expected him to do anything but deny it till he was blue in the face. And so once I had the admission, I went to what I considered the most important question of all, which was, "Craig, are you a weirdo for kids?" And then, and only then, did I get a reaction. His head spun around and he says, "No, it's not like that, dude. I swear to God, I'm not." It was a very strong reaction and one that had a pinch of outrage to it, and not the kind of "please believe me" that you get when someone is lying to save their skin. Now, I guess I never truly know for sure, but in the moment, his answer, it rang true and I believed him, but that still left the question of what the hell was he doing making those videos? And I guess it might sound a bit weird, but I kind of backed off on wanting to know why. I mean, I could probably take a shot in the dark and it wouldn't be too far off, but even if I knew, it wouldn't change anything. Craig was weird. Really weird, actually, but as far as I knew, he was harmless, and I actually kind of liked the guy too, so there was that. And then, because I liked him, I knew he didn't deserve what was definitely coming his way, and I told him to quite literally get the hell out of town. And Craig knew it too. He knew that once people saw that video, and knew the guy who made it was a security guard down at the mall, it wasn't just his job he'd be in danger of losing. And so even though his record was clean and I didn't personally believe that he was some kind of diddler, the best thing for him to do was leave town and start over someplace else. And once I was done giving my speech, Craig looked like he was searching for the right words, and then he burst into tears out of nowhere, and he didn't stop crying for a good couple of minutes. Now don't get me wrong, I didn't feel too bad for him. Uploading videos like that was dumb as hell, and it was only a matter of time before someone recognized him. But his dumb mistake had ruined his life, or at least it was going to ruin his life if he didn't find someplace far away to live, and fast. Well, that was the last I saw of Craig. When we clocked out, he thanked me for letting him know that his video was going viral, and then told me that I might not see him around much anymore. I told him I was sorry to hear that, but it was for the best. He needed a fresh start someplace else, and he needed to fix whatever needed fixing so he didn't feel the need to put that kind of crap online. Because it was either going to get him hurt, or, this was half the reason I felt very little sympathy for him, I felt like whatever his thing was specifically, it had the potential to turn into something dangerous. Like maybe he was telling the truth when I asked him if he wasn't some kid like her or not, but people change, right? For better and for worse. And a dude who dresses up like a baby and chooses to do so in some skimpy little diaper thing and not like a onesie, that stuff's gotta have the potential to get worse. I don't care what anyone says, and I say that as a father of 2 daughters. Craig was gone by the time everyone realized what he was posting. All our coworkers either got sent the video directly or they got told about it at work. And so Craig's reputation was just about obliterated come the end of the week. Our boss said it was good that he got the hell out of town because he'd have fired his butt if he tried to stick around. And there was a lot of hate towards Craig like that, and I get it. But all I really feel anymore when I think about him is fear. I hope he's doing okay and that he found a good woman or man or whatever and settled down, because one of the alternatives is that he didn't get himself together and he got worse. And then if he gets worse, maybe he'll do something terrible with a kid or a baby. And then it'll kind of be my fault for not taking him around the back of the mall and shooting him when I had the goddamn chance. I've worked in medical science for nearly 20 years now, mostly as a lab technician, but also as a coordinator and principal investigator. And many years ago now, I used to work in a small medical clinic in the greater London area. We mostly ran blood and urine tests, and while we had an x-ray room and a few other things too, it was 95% blood and urine week in and week out. And as you can imagine, we're exceptionally careful when handling samples. I can't imagine many of you have received calls saying, we misplaced that blood you gave us. Can you come back and give us some more? And that's because we're really careful with them. And so one day, when one of our nurses came to us saying that he dropped our sample, our first thought was concern, and not for the bloody sample, but for him. Now, I don't want to use his real name because that'll give away which clinic this took place in, so I'll just call him Dave. And when Dave dropped a sample, I was worried that he might not be feeling well. When I asked him what happened, Dave said that the beaker dropped from his grip after he suddenly became lightheaded. So we sent him home for 2 days, then he came back feeling much better. Now, Dave was a great nurse, an asset to the clinic, and God knows we wanted to look after him. So a couple of weeks later, when it happened for a second time, I recommended that he just go to the doctors for a full checkup. Dizzy spells can be a sign of some pretty nasty illnesses, but following a full medical exam, he was told that there was nothing wrong with him. We were relieved, why wouldn't we be? Not to mention, Dave did admit to skipping breakfast on the day of the second spill. So once again, it passed without too much suspicion, and Dave continued to work at the clinic. But then came the day that I walked in on him doing something that I told myself was impossible, and it felt like I was hit by a train. We trusted Dave to be alone with the samples, so it wasn't in the least bit unusual for him to be left alone and uninterrupted for sometimes long periods of time. So when I walked into the containment lab, I caught him by surprise, just as he was lowering a sample beaker of urine from his mouth. I froze. He froze. Then he dropped the beaker to the floor and mumbled something like, I dropped it. But it was too late. I'd seen everything, and there was no unseeing it either. Dave begged me not to tell anyone. He swore that he'd never do it again, and even offered me money to keep quiet. But what else could I do? To say his behavior constituted gross misconduct would be putting it mildly, and we simply couldn't have anyone with such inclinations around the clinic. End of story. As you can imagine, it was quite a big deal, but all the General Medical Council was interested in was keeping it out of the papers, so when Dave just sort of disappeared, it suited everyone just fine. It was the end of our problem, but not the end of his problem, because procedure stated that we pass on what we'd learned to the police. Dave had broken laws pertaining to the mishandling of biological materials, which covers everything from blood to stool samples. It was unlikely that he'd be locked up. A first offense would get him a fine and suspended sentence at most, so we were told, but he'd never be able to work in the health service ever again. His life as he knew it was over, But to be fair, he probably should have thought about that before he decided to take a shot of piss right as I walked in. Now anyway, life moves on without Dave, and although we missed his skills and experience, we did not miss the feeling of knowing that there was someone like that working amongst us. I think it was like 6 or 7 weeks, long enough that we'd almost let the whole sorry episode slip from our minds, or at least I personally almost had anyway. And then one day, after driving home from work, a car pulled into my driveway behind me, having followed me home from the clinic to block me in. Now, I knew who it was the moment I saw the car. I'd seen that car almost every day in the clinic's car park for almost 3 years. It was Dave's car, and he had followed me home. He walked down my driveway towards me as I got out of my car, shouting at him to get away from my house before I called the police. Now, I made such a racket that my husband actually came out, and our kids watched from the front window as he walked Dave back up the driveway. He wasn't polite about it either, neither of them were, and Dave only started to back off once my husband had promised to bounce his head off the concrete. We reported him to the police, but since Dave was out on bail, there wasn't much that they could do unless they caught him in the act of actually threatening us. All they could do as it stood was warn him to stay away from me, or his attempts to do so would constitute harassment. But it didn't stop him, and things only got worse. It all culminated with Dave trying to drive me off the road one evening when I was on my way home from work. I knew I was in trouble from the second I looked in my rear view and saw his car in the road behind me. I just didn't think that he was mental enough to try and scare me in such a dangerous situation. I don't think he wanted me dead. Or maybe he did, who knows. But if I think he really wanted to murder me, he could have done it with a knife come closing time at the clinic. However, that didn't make what he did any less frightening because his reckless driving ended up with me careening off the road and into a ditch. I wasn't hurt, not too bad anyway, but I did need to go to the hospital to get checked out just in case. It was a horrible experience, but like many dark clouds, it did have a silver lining. Dave's dangerous driving had been caught on several cameras, meaning he was swiftly arrested and kept on remand before his trial since it was deemed that he was a threat to the public. That new dangerous driving charge meant prison was now on the cards, and although he only got 3 months for all the offenses he racked up, it was still 3 months where we could all feel safe again. He didn't bother coming back to do anything, not to my house or to the clinic. He did 3 months of a 6-month sentence, meaning any other offense would have him recalled to prison. Now, I was appalled at what a light sentence he got at first, but now I actually appreciate how smart it was. 3 months is nothing to sniff at for a first-time lag, and then the prospect of another 3 months in jail was enough to deter Dave from any further threatening interactions. And it's a bloody good thing that he didn't turn up at our house again, because I swear my husband would have done time for murder.
So my house was built in the 70s. Not particularly new, but not really that old, I guess, too. We moved here in the early 2000s. I don't really know any of the history behind it, but we've always joked that there are ghosts here. Doors slamming, creaking, and things randomly disappearing has always been blamed on ghosts, but around 5 years ago, it started becoming a tad more aggressive, you could say. The sounds of light footsteps in the hallway, scratches from the second floor and inside the wall. Mind you, we have no rodent problem, so it seemed sort of unexplainable to the entire family. Then, one day, around 3 to 4 years ago, I was home alone sitting in the living room when a loud bang appeared from the second floor. It was so loud I was worried that the upstairs cabinet had fallen over on the floor or something. When the bang hit, my lights flickered too and the TV turned off and on. I could feel the shake all the way down the stairs. I went up to check what happened, obviously, and when I did, everything seemed the same. This has happened several times now, and it's almost entirely identical. A loud bang, a shake, flickering lights, but nothing ever seems out of place. What makes this worse, too, is that you can't hear it when you're upstairs. You can only hear it when you're downstairs. I know that sounds weird, but that's what happens. I've been called on my phone to stop slamming the door so hard when I'm laying silently in my bed and stuff like that, and I haven't heard a thing. In the past year, I've also started seeing things. I might just have imagined things, but at one point I could have swore that I saw a toddler sleeping in my brother's bed. I saw her pretty clearly too. She was young, maybe 3 years. She had long blonde hair and her arm hung over the edge of the bed. When I approached her, she just disappeared. This was probably a year ago, but it still really confuses and spooks me. Then, a few weeks ago, I encountered her again. I was home alone when someone knocked on the door. I was a bit confused as I wasn't expecting anyone. As I approached the hallway, I heard the door closing and I heard a young girl saying, "Hello," like she had just come home and was announcing her being there. I felt chills run down my back, but I still opened the door to look. My brother is 5, and I figured that he might have just come home early or something, but no one was there. Today, I closed the door, like properly shut, and then it just opened a bit again. And when I looked at the open door, it shut again quickly, closed. And now I keep hearing banging sounds from downstairs, and I just don't know what to do. I'm like unironically kind of worried. Also, I don't know if this matters, but the dreams that I get in this house are always so vivid compared to when I'm not at home. Sometimes I wake up with the sheets off my bed and blanket as well because I sleep so uneasy, I guess. Anyways, I could really do with some advice. I don't think speaking to whatever this is works. I tried, and I guess maybe things stopped being so noisy for a bit, but then it would just start up again, and that's been a bit of a theme for this whole thing. So yeah, if you have any advice, then please do let me know. Me, my best friend, her girlfriend, and my boyfriend were walking home from dinner and stopped at a 7-Eleven. My boyfriend wanted a couple of beers. We waited outside while he got what he needed. As we were outside, I noticed a girl with a backpack walking around the parking lot. She walked up to another girl who was on her phone, and girl number 2 said to whoever she was talking to, "Yeah, my homegirl here, 1 second," and proceeded to tell girl 1 to go and sit in a car occupied by a large white male while she went inside. I noticed the male and the girl number 1 kept looking at us from the car while girl number 2 stayed on the phone inside. I specifically noticed that the male said something and pointed, and girl number 1 laughed while looking at us. Here's where it gets sketchy too. Girl number 1 gets out of the car and comes up to my friend and asks her if she has a pen and a paper. She told her that she has a pen but no paper, and we didn't have any either. And here's how the conversation went after she received the pen. Girl number 1 said, "Where do you live? The trailer park behind here?" No, but nearby." Girl number 1 said, "Oh, okay, well, my grandmother lives there. Where do you work?" My friend said the name of a work girl, and she said, "Oh, really? I know that place. My sister used to work there. What's your name again? You look familiar." My friend tells her name. She says, "Oh, yeah, I think I know you. I knew you looked familiar." My friend has never seen her before, mind you. The girl says, "So how far until you're home?" At this point, my boyfriend came out of the store. The moment that he did, the girl instantaneously wrapped up the conversation and quickly retreated back to the car, saying, "Well, thanks for the pen," not even returning it. Nor did she write anything the entire time. She also kept trying to touch my friend. I did notice that, specifically at her wrists. The girl also had a hospital band on and was saying that she had depression or something. I noticed the man watching the entire interaction and said something to the girl the minute that she opened the car door. He seemed sort of frustrated with her maybe. But they watched us until we walked off, maybe a minute or 2 later. They proceeded to sit in the car for at least 3 minutes. At least that's how long it took until they were out of my sight. Probably longer since they made no effort to pull off. But the whole thing just seemed I don't know, really sketchy and weird. Has anyone heard of anything like this before? I'm especially worried as my friend doesn't have a car and walks everywhere, so there's a good chance that she may be back there at some point. Should we be worried? So I was a security guard for this local company in my area. I was assigned to a water park with another guard who was regularly there keeping watch. He was to train me and show me around and tell me what codes open what doors and stuff like that. But I first noticed how quick he was to enter and leave the property, that he never wanted to spend more than like 10 minutes inside the property before he would be eager to leave. Our first night was simple. There was nothing exciting or interesting going on, so our night dragged a bit. After a few hours, I asked him if he'd experienced anything unusual while working here. He told me that he's had some problems with people trying to enter the property without permission, but that's about it. He also told me that he hated working there because of his encounters with these people. He said that they creeped him out because of just how sneaky they were. He didn't really want to tell me much because he was afraid that I would leave the post. That should have been a red flag for me, but I was too excited to let anything like that scare me. A few more hours later and our shift is over, so we check out and go home for the day. The next night, my boss calls me to explain that the security guard, my partner, had resigned. I must admit that I was a little bit upset about that because now I have to work a two-man post all by myself with barely any knowledge on the place. Anyway, fast forward a few weeks, I started to get the hang of things and created my own routine with no issues at all. There were no break-ins, no vandalism, nothing. It's now 2 a.m. and I was outside at the front of the property completing my rounds when I heard a door slam from inside. I jumped because of how loud it was, and as I started to walk back into the property, I continued to hear doors opening and closing. I could feel myself getting nervous because it was my first situation that I've ever had at this place. As I walk inside and started to check the doors and complete a round to make sure that there was no one on the property, I get to this corridor where there was a set of stairs that led down to a door that was wide open. I gingerly walked down the stairs to close and lock the door because I was too scared to take a look inside. But as I turned around to head back up the stairs, I noticed a man dressed in all black standing at the top of the stairs. I take a step back and realize that I'm cornered, and if he was to try anything, I would have nowhere to run or hide. So I politely asked him if he needed any help, and he didn't reply. I then asked him how he got into the property. He still didn't reply. He slowly turned his head and snapped his fingers, and then from the left side of the staircase, another man slowly crawled to his side like a dog on all fours. And at that, I turned around and kicked the door open and ran inside and locked myself in a bathroom. I did this as I called my boss and told him what I'd witnessed. They sent an armed security guard to my position to complete a walkthrough to make sure that I was safe. As I got the call that the area was clear, I came out and told them everything from start to finish. I realized that they didn't believe me, so I clocked out and went home for the night. The next morning, I received a call from my boss explaining that they had checked the security footage from the night before, and what they told me horrified me. Every hour when I would complete my rounds inside the property, those same two men would follow me through the facility as if they were stalking me, like as if it was a game to them. After that, I asked for a new position because I was too horrified to work at that water park. I now know why my trainer didn't want to work there anymore too, and this actually happened to me. I have more creepy stories like this from when I was working security, so if you want to hear them, I'd be happy to share them, but thanks for listening, and it's good to finally get this off my chest. When I was in my early days of my career and joined an internship in a small town, a few of us were housed by the company that we worked for in a modified apartment. But they basically had joined two apartments together, so there were 3 bedrooms and a bathroom on each side, with a really, really long corridor in between. Now, towards the end of the assignment, we had a group presentation, so the bunch of us living on our side, we worked on the presentation together, decided to head very early into the office and practice. As per our plans made the previous evening, me and this girl called Simna woke up first around 4:30, so we could use the 2 bathrooms each and get ready. I didn't mind using the bathroom at the other end of the corridor, so I collected my toiletries and headed that way. Simna was doing the same on our side, and we didn't really talk as it was way too early and others were also sleeping. The 2 bedrooms on the other side were empty and one was closed. I assumed that they were sleeping. I set my stuff on the counter and realized quickly that I forgot my bath towel, so came out of the bathroom and saw Simna standing in the middle of the darkened corridor with her back to me. I sort of halted immediately because something seemed very off with the way that she was standing. The hair on my arms was raised up and warning bells went off in my head. I must have made some sound though, because this person turned their head around to look at me. It looked exactly like her, but she was smiling broadly at me, like really smirking. I quickly said, hey, what's going on?" to her, but at the same time sort of backed up into the bathroom where there was light and hot water to use as a weapon, I suppose. I didn't dare come out and I started praying. After around 20 to 25 minutes of time had passed, I heard knocking on the bathroom door and my roommate's, not Simna, voice asking me if I was done. I didn't say anything to her. I couldn't understand it myself, but as I walked down the corridor to my room, I saw Simna getting ready in her room. I went to her and was like, "What the heck, dude, you scared me." And she did not know what I was talking about. I did not know this girl very well, but she was not a prankster from what I could tell. Also, it was too early in the morning and we were too geared up about the presentation for her to do something like that, and to pretend like nothing happened. Till the end of that internship, she maintained that it wasn't her that scared me that morning. To this day, I cannot explain what or who I saw that morning. "22 years ago, I lived in a house on a lake. I rented a room from a lady that lived in the other room. I had been living with a good friend but moved out and needed a new place. My parents actually found the listing in the newspaper and set me up with it. So, aside from a strange living condition of living in a 2-bedroom bungalow with a complete stranger in the middle of nowhere, it seemed like it was actually going to be pretty nice. My new housemate had a large dog that actually kind of freaked me out a bit. However, she ended up being a super sweet dog. My housemate was never home too. Between work, her friends, and her boyfriend, I saw her like all of 3 days out of 3 months that I lived at the house. So, in the end, I practically took care of the dog. The thing about this dog, though, is that she would hide under my housemate's bed until she was hungry or needed to go outside. And never having had dogs, I didn't really know any better. The first month wasn't anything to write home about. I got some awesome photos of the moon over the lake. Somewhere in this time frame, I started recognizing the facts above. I also started getting a weird vibe in the house, I guess. In fact, if I wasn't in my room, I wanted to be in there pretty much only. I also only felt safe during the day. I use that term because the feeling at night was the same as if you think something bad is about to happen. The problem is that you just couldn't quantify it. But at some point, I started hearing knocking noises randomly in the ceiling near the kitchen. I figured that it was just birds because there's a lot around. One afternoon, though, I decided to check out the attic crawl space located above the kitchen cabinets. It was a wooden door with a single lock or latch on it, and a fixed handle. I'd eaten lunch and climbed up there to check it out, opened the door, and didn't feel threatened or anything. I peeked my head in and looked left and right over the bedrooms. Basic attic, nothing special. I closed the door and climbed down. But from that moment on, something definitely changed. The dog came out of the kitchen and just sort of stared at me, like didn't even move, not an inch. It honestly made me very uneasy. I tried the tricks of outside, treat, play, but she just didn't move. So, in the end, I just sort of went to my room and shut the door. In the weeks that followed, the events became more and more unnerving as well. I began to stop being able to sleep. I turned to leaving music on overnight, very low volume, but it was on nevertheless. As time passed, I got to where I felt like someone was standing in the corner of my room. One evening, the alarm or clock radio in the living room, it also turned on by itself. At first, I didn't even know it was there, to be honest, because I never went in there. Nothing in there was mine. Next, over the last 2 months, it had never gone off. But I asked my housemate, when I saw her next, about that, and she denied setting it. She was also visibly confused as to why it would go off like that. But I began to feel as though I was being watched in every room. I felt as though the thing in my room was always there. I began to wake from sleep for no reason. I began grinding my teeth at night as well. I moved to sleeping with a black light on, the lowest light level that I could get in the room. Music became CDs that would repeat indefinitely, and now I would wake up, look around, and see nothing and then try to go back to sleep. My housemate and a friend were at the house one evening too, and the friend claimed to be a psychic, and she looked dead at me and asked me how I was sleeping. I hadn't seen the housemate in weeks and hadn't told her about my problems. She then tells me that there's apparently an old man in my room and that he doesn't like me. I asked if there was anything that I could do, and she said no. I began addressing this man, though, trying to fix things in a desperate attempt to get more sleep and asking him to leave me alone, but life got much worse. I would be on the phone with my now wife and would fall asleep, and she would tell me years later that there were really strange sounds that scared her. She said that she would stay on the phone to ensure that nothing happened to me. I began to have regular nightmares every time that I closed my eyes. My work started to suffer. I was exhausted. It was around this time too that I began to see a dark cloud like mist that appeared to pour out of the cinder wall, with the lights on, mind you, in the corner of the room the man had been reported standing in. I would walk over and touch the area, but there was never anything there. I would go back to bed and see it still happening. My wife was getting ready one morning, and while putting on makeup, she also said that she told me that the face just wasn't hers. She left the bathroom and she never went back in. That night, we were both asleep. She had become accustomed to my nightmares at this point. I had a dream that she and I were in my car driving down the road. It was nice. I look at her and then back at the road in time to see 3 children in the road. The next sequence happened so fast, I had no time to react. Each hit the windshield and sort of appeared zombie-like. I immediately awoke, obviously. I was sweating, shaking, and scared. My wife was instantly awake also. She asked what happened, and I relayed the story above. And her face lost color. She looked very concerned. Thinking it was the content of the dream, I apologized, but she sat silent, long enough to make me wonder if something was wrong with me. She eventually broke the silence and said that just before you woke me, I dreamed that we had just gotten into your car. We left, and the next day I found somewhere else to stay. We moved to another state, and the first night in the new place, I slept non-stop, perfectly. I woke up rested and recognized like the silence in my head, if that makes sense. And after getting out, I'm more convinced than ever that there is something going on with that house at the lake. So I'll start off by saying that I've always been open-minded. So has my friend and her partner. We've all had our little strange or odd encounters over the years, and sometimes came up with the logical explanation or left it to the unknown, I guess. But we have never had something like this happen before. Well, the car part anyway. So, this happened a couple of hours ago. Me and my friend and her partner were downstairs about to watch a film. Their young son, 4 years old, was upstairs fast asleep. The stairs are in the front room where we were sat, and their 4-week-old daughter was in the Moses basket by the sofa. We had turned off the lights, shut the curtains, and got comfortable. There was a small bang upstairs, so my friend's partner went to check their son. All fine. But as the partner walked down the stairs, he heard almost like a wind chime jingle from their bedroom and said out loud like, "Huh, that's weird," but put it down to a possible draft somewhere or something. Not even 5 minutes later, we get comfy, go to watch the film, and me and my friend notice car lights outside, rather bright, so we take a peek. It's their car, full beams on, for about 10 to 15 seconds and then off again. And we all looked at each other dumbfounded. Then again, a bit longer this time. Then the indicators flashed a few times and stopped. And as it stopped, their son screamed, like not even a second passed, and he started screaming and crying to the point that he was so wound up that he was nearly sick. Of course, as soon as he screamed, the dad ran straight up as my best friend was breastfeeding. The dad brought him down and he was inconsolable. And being only 4, he couldn't exactly say much, just sort of some broken words. Then the TV went off with no warning. Then a bang upstairs and then silence. We spoke for a good hour or so trying to decipher what the heck just happened, but the car keys were in the other room, nowhere near any living animal or human. When we approached the car, me and my friend's partner, we checked if it was locked, and it was. We looked in the car manual and had a Google search, and nothing comes up regarding the full beams just staying on and then intermittent hazard lights going off. There was no alarm as well, which was really strange, and definitely nobody around. But since then, their son won't settle. Their little girl keeps waking randomly and crying, and they've heard a couple of more bangs. I've never experienced car lights being set on or off like that before. Usually an electrical fault would happen when the vehicle is on, or you would have a warning light, but nothing. It's a newish car as well, so quite full of tech, and to be honest, it's been checked out and there doesn't seem to be anything wrong. I have had a few experiences myself, but usually with lights in the home, candles, noises, etc., but nothing to this level. Also, the first feeling that I had was sickness and dread. I've not had gut feelings like this regarding the paranormal for many years now, but I genuinely felt unwelcome, and I dare say, almost watched too.